Tonystark Satellite Media.
Welcome to Red River Podcast. I don't know what number it is, but I'm going to do another one-on-one here. I finally get to talk to somebody who, you know, we've been kind of Facebook friends for a minute, and if you didn't live in Buffalo, I'm sure we would have hung out a lot by now. So welcome, John Scondotto, a.k.a. John Draper.
Hey, how's it going? I have to correct you. I don't live in Buffalo. I live in Albany, which is
Albany.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
Albany is only about 170 miles from New York City. Buffalo is like 350 or something.
Yeah. I was giving you way more credit, you know, than you deserve.
Yeah, you thought. Yeah, well, I talk like I live so far up north, and people are like, "Dude, you're like a 2-hour ride." Like, what are you talking about? This is the last place on earth I ever thought I would live, and I've lived here for 6 years. So going on 6 years now, I've been up here. I like it. It's great. I mean, I don't really have any issues with it. It has its pros and its cons, but the pros are pretty significant if you're someone who, like, I grew up I lived in Brooklyn most of my life, and I lived in Manhattan outside of that before I ever came up here. So space is amazing. I don't know how you are with space, but space is a big deal.
No, I like space for sure. I mean, I live in West Babylon, like Long Island, so it's like, I feel like I have the best of both worlds, you know, like I'm close to what I consider civilization, but I also have leg room, and, you know, parking is never an issue.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, so listen, the background really is, you know, a lot of times we talk about music, and we seem to be kind of into like the same shit, but you haven't been in a band for a while, so somewhere along the way you progress into a podcast called Wrestling Soup, and now you do something called Break the Apocalypse podcast. So I want to get there too, but I also want to get like the history, because I know we talk a lot, and I don't know your musical history, but a lot of people seem to know it, and the bands that you were in seem to be a big deal, and I love Synthetic 16 after you told me to listen to it. And you know, you're part of the Scondotto brother dynasty.
I am. I'm in the Ugly Baldwin.
Yeah, that's right.
And 90s.
Oh, you're like
called the unattractive Baldwin.
Are you Daniel?
I don't know which one I am. I don't know. I think I was the first one to shave his head, so whatever that means.
Started that trend.
First one to accept the baldness. Yeah. To accept baldness. To embrace the darkness.
So, what was it like growing up in Brooklyn?
This was the summer. I don't end up going to a show till the fall of, this is 1988, and it's a doozy. It's like my first show. It's a matinee, and it's the return of Gorilla Biscuits, who had been banned from CB's because they had a show there at Youth of Today that turned into like a riot like a year or two earlier. So it was Beyond, Maximum Penalty, Gorilla Biscuits, Raw Deal, and a special attraction was a Straight Ahead reunion.
Oh, wow. I think didn't someone just post that flyer?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's a memorable day.
Shout out to Kevin Egan.
Yeah. Oh, I know Kevin. So the first band I see is Beyond, which is really funny because the Beyond album that comes out years later, there's a picture of them at CB's, and you see me and Mike standing in the picture, like the back of our heads. But it's my first show.
Yeah.
And I have no idea what's going on. I'd never seen moshing. Like, before we got there, we went with a bunch of kids from like the suburbs who really didn't know anybody there. And they were giving me like the lesson of like, you know, don't talk to this. If you're on the line, people are going to ask you for money. Don't give them any money because they'll think you're from Jersey.
Yes.
Like, you know, that was like,
it's like when you go into like prison, it's like the rules.
Yeah.
Just like,
it was, I swear to God, this was the D train was at this point running from Sheepshead Bay to the Bronx. So we would take the D train to West 4th, walk through the park, Washington Square Park, which was a fucking hellhole.
Hell yeah.
Not like Tompkins at the time.
No, yeah.
But it was bad. I mean, it was especially like if
I bought fake mushrooms in Washington.
Oh yeah, bought tons of weed there. I lived across the street from there years later in life. But so I'm like learning, and it's like, listen, there's going to be a lot of people there. You can't like, if they gave me like a list of people, like if we tell you that that's who that is, you have to don't say anything. And I'm like, how am I going to know? I don't know anybody. Like, to like, just be careful. Like, there's certain people like Tommy Carroll, who's the singer Straight Ahead. He was like at the top of that list.
Okay.
It was like Jay Crackdown from the band Crackdown, Tommy Carroll, the Sunset Skins. Anybody like that, like comes near you, talks to you, like, just like, don't open your mouth. Don't say anything. And I was just like, wow, I was like, this is crazy. Was
that like something, was that like a deterrent, or was that something exciting and you're like, oh, fuck it, let's do it?
I was worried because I didn't know, like, I'm like, how am I going to know who the Sunset Skins are? Yeah. Like, I have no concept of, like, who Minus is, or Saab, like, or Jorge, people that would become my friends, like, like within a year of being there. But like, I didn't know this. I just didn't know who anybody. It's like, how am I going to know who Tommy Carroll from the Straight Ahead is?
So different these days.
Yeah, it's so different. So then I get there, and like Beyond's playing, and we wait on this long line, and people are asking me for money immediately. And I just noticed there was not a lot of girls, mostly skinheads, and it was a smattering of well-dressed people who would turn out to be Gorilla Biscuits, like what I would consider well-dressed, like Gap clothes.
Yeah.
So the moshing starts, and I grab my brother because I don't know what to do. And my brother Mike is like, get the fuck off me. Like, like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I don't know what to do. Like, I just didn't know what to do. And that was like during Beyond. And then Maximum Penalty came on, and the place got way more lively, which at that time I had no idea any connection I would have to that band. And I was like, this is great. This is amazing. By the time Raw Deal played, I had a shirt on. It's all cut up. I bought like 2 T-shirts I think I bought a T-shirt from GB, and then I may have bought something from MP, but it got stolen. That was a big deal. A lot of my things were getting like stolen. I would hide shirts that I would buy so I could dance, and it was incredible.
That's crazy. I mean, what a great first show to jump into.
Yeah.
CB's 88. I guess you were. I mean, yeah. I mean, a great time. I mean, sure, you could have been 10 years older and seen maybe Zeppelin at the end, but like this is like this is like brand new, and when people talk about CB's, like that's a great show to start off with.
Well, the following week I went again. It was Murphy's Law, Super Touch, American Standard, and Collapse. Collapse is Sergio Vega's hardcore band.
Okay.
And Murphy's Law took the picture for their Back with a Bong album, which was I think it was in Thrasher at the time, because I was still buying Thrasher. There's this big picture. It's the back with a Bong album of all these people outside of CBGB's. That's that show. I was at that show. Amazing. Like Murphy's Law it was a different vibe. It was more of a fun vibe. Super Touch were very posy, and like it wasn't like Raw Deal was brutal. Like Raw Deal was like fucking like let's go. You know what I mean? And Murphy's Law is this fun vibe. Like Jimmy is hilarious. I was amazed by him. Like just amazed by him. Like I couldn't believe how funny he was.
He's
charismatic.
Really like we talked to him on If I Ruled the World, and he was just so. I don't know. He's so great, and like to see him at AMH out by me, and then also see him open up for the Misfits at Madison Square, or wherever. Yeah. I don't remember where it was. So time goes on, and along the way you get influenced to just start join a band. Like where does the actual point where like John is like, fuck it, I want to sing?
Well, the thing is, like, I just wanted to go to as many shows as possible so I could dance and like jump off the stage. And that was like, and get the mic. Like, that was the thing, like to fight to get the mic in the crowd. When Gorilla Biscuits pass the mic, you want to be one of the people to get that mic.
For sure.
And so that first year, which was my senior year of high school, I would go to as many shows as possible. L'Amour would have a smattering of shows. Like, I think MP played like a metal show there. We all went to see that. So like my life revolved around Sundays and like going to those matinees on Sundays. But at the time, I never thought I would be in a band. My brother Mike is in a band called Close Call, where he's playing bass with the lead guitarist is John Lamacchia from Candiria, because he grew up in our neighborhood. You know him through kids, John Bebop. And Mike's hardcore band's great. Like they're very stop and go, like traditional hardcore, but they got a good singer, they got good hooks. I can't remember if Mike was good on bass. I assume he was good. I don't know. And it's so long ago. So like that's going on, and they're playing like little BS things here and there. So life is wonderful. Everything's great. And then about, I want to say early 90, a friend of mine calls me up and says, "Hey, do you want to audition for Maximum Penalty?" And I was like, "What?" You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, how is this even on the radar? We had mutual friends. I didn't know Maximum Penalty. I did not know Joe Affey, who has been like my lifelong, like my heterosexual life partner pretty much ever since. But I knew that Joe was from Brooklyn, which was a big deal. There weren't a lot of hardcore people from Brooklyn. And he was the only guy, I think, in the band from Brooklyn. And there was a circumstance where the singer was going away or going. He's got, it's not going to be around for a while, and they want to keep playing. So I was like, this is amazing. So most people knew me like that I was like a singer going to college, or I was on the, I just started to go to junior college, and I was in theater programs, and I was competing for vocal scholarships and stuff like that. And I was okay. I wasn't great, but I was good.
Yeah,
but
you were
better.
Always if you were competing for vocal scholarships, I mean, like that's fucking like.
Yeah, but
I didn't even know that existed.
Well, it was like I don't know if it exists today, but it was called the American College Theater Festival. But at the time, but even I was a teenager, I was in a theater company that you had to audition with. You had to either sing, act, or dance. And I always felt like my station in life was I was going to be like a game show host or something. Like I was. Like I never, like nuns told me
I could see
this.
that. Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, like nuns told me, like when I was in 6th or 7th grade, I just was impersonate like Bill Murray from Saturday Night Live or Eddie Murphy from Saturday Night Live. It was just
no Richard.
I just
Dawson.
wanted. Yeah, no, not Richard Dawson, because he kissed people, and I thought that was weird to kiss people you didn't know, like when I was a kid. Well, now it's like
Yeah, no.
But also I'm Italian. We kiss everybody.
Yeah.
So
You're like, there's no big deal.
Yeah, it's no big deal. So I get this phone call, and I'm 19. I'm living with my parents. And my brother Mike was like, holy shit. So I learned the demo. And at the time, this comp came out like a little before that called Where the Wild Things Are. Unbelievable hardcore comp. Maybe like in the annals of history. Just a fucking beast of a compilation. MP's got 2 good songs on there.
Outburst.
Shitera's on there. Outburst. Dude, Outburst, I think, kicked that off.
Yeah. I had Joe on, and since then, me and Joe are pretty cool.
Yeah, Joe's a good guy. I know Joe.
I like Joe a lot.
But, dude, when that thing came out, beast. Just a beast. Because Revelation Records had all the straight edge bands, but to see, like, Paul Barris stretched out, like, with his, like, on the ground, and, like, it's got Shitera, it's got Maximum Penalty, it's got Raw Deal on here, and this is before the Killing Time album came out, before they were Killing Time. So I get this MP thing comes up. They're rehearsing at a studio called Ace London, which would come back again in my life many times, in Marine Park, Brooklyn, owned by a great guy named Joe Bravo, instrumental guy in a lot of big bands, Life of Agony, Biohazard, Typo, instrumental guy. He owned a studio. He was in a metal band called Big Bad Wolf. And Joe was a good-looking guy with long hair who owned a studio. I mean, can you imagine how cool he was?
Yeah.
I mean, he was like in a successful local band. He owned a studio where cool people rehearsed. So I get to talk to Joe Affey on the phone, and he's very standoffish with me because he doesn't know me, and he's like very gruff. But I know the songs. I learned like their full demo, and I learned the 2 songs off the comp. So I come in, and I think it was like a Saturday or Sunday afternoon. And I don't even know who's in the band, but everybody that I thought was in the band from the time I had seen them the previous times, not a single person other than Joe was in the band at this point. It was all different people. And 2 of them were in a band from Brooklyn that was a very big hardcore band to people in Brooklyn called Social Disorder.
Okay.
And which was like a very, very instrumental band to a lot of people. They influenced a lot of people. They were one of the only hardcore bands from Brooklyn at the time. So, but MP is, doing pretty good. I mean, they're like a mid-level size hardcore band at a time where there's regular shows. So I go in, I'm a mess. I'm growing a beard because I'm doing this play at my college.
Man, you were all about, wow, growing a beard for a play. That's great.
I'll send you the picture. I have the picture somewhere. I think it's on the Lament Facebook group.
Okay, cool.
It's a picture we took from the first show. So and my voice is very high and like very, and I'm I'm a healthy, relatively young person at this point. And I'm doing Jimmy Williams songs. And Jimmy is like a hip hop influenced dude who happens to be black in the heart of a lot of people, especially fronting successful bands. And, that's not really something in my head at the time. I just know that I'm a fan, and I want to do this. So I do the show. I do the practice. And the bass player at the time was a guy named Mark Sisto, who was in one of the versions of Breakdown, among other bands. But that was one of the bigger things he had done. And so I'm talking to Joe and Mark because they kind of run the band. And they're like, so we got a show coming up in a couple of weeks. We're playing with Raw Deal at the Anthrax. Do you want to do the show? And I'm like, first of all, the Anthrax is the big straight edge club in Connecticut that they've written books about. It's a monster club that I've seen pictures of in fanzines.
Yeah, for sure.
And Raw Deal is like my favorite hardcore band. And I was like, so I'm like in the band, and like, well, you're kind of in the band, you know what I mean? It was like this weird, and they're only a little bit older than me. They're like 20 and I'm 19, but at that point, they might as well have been 50.
Yeah, it made a difference back then for sure.
Made a difference. Mark was 21 or maybe even 22 at the time. And Nikki and Richie, the other guys in the band, they were a little bit older. And I'm like, all right, yeah, I'm going to do this fucking show.
Did you feel like that ability, like after that practice, did you feel like, okay, I could definitely do this?
Well, the thing is, I wasn't in any bands. So it wasn't even like I was just like some kid that was friends with people in other bands. Like other people recommended me because they knew I could sing in real life.
Yeah. And
they knew I was like a normal guy. They were like, he's just like a hardcore guy. Like he's like a weird, normal hardcore guy. And I think they were just, I don't know what was going on with them internally at the time, but they knew I wasn't going to be a problem. I wasn't going to be like some crazy dude who gets gets in some kind of trouble.
Would you say you were more like Sammy Hagar or Gary Cherone?
I was probably Gary Cherone. Because it's like the old thing. Like Sammy's got some chops. Sammy knows what he's doing.
Okay.
But so now I got this show going on at the Anthrax. I forget who was opening, but it was us and Killing Time. It was like 4 bands, and it's a Friday night. It's in Connecticut. It's in Norwalk, Connecticut. So now my first show ever is a huge show going out of state to play with one of my favorite hardcore bands in one of my favorite hardcore bands. Unbelievable, right? And I'm 20 years old. It's February of, I guess, 90. And I am over the moon. I got like 20 something people to drive up from Brooklyn to come to this show.
Wow.
Like I got maybe even more. Like my wife, this is a whole other story. My wife is at this show.
Oh, really?
My wife is like 15. Yeah. My wife was my high school girlfriend, but we broke up for like 25 years and got back together like 7 years ago.
I remember.
Yeah. So like,
story, yeah.
So now my wife is going. She's lying about because she's a lot younger than me. So she's like, all my Guido friends are driving up. They're driving my brother up. Some of the friends in the hardcore scene are driving up because people want to see this shit. And I am like, I pull into the parking lot we pull into the parking lot, and I just remember seeing like, I don't know what to expect. And I see all these like BMWs and Mercedes in the Norwalk parking lot of the Anthrax. And I was like, oh, this is going to be a very different crowd than what I'm used to in the Lower East Side.
Yeah.
Like, I just remember that. The first thing that popped in my head was all the expensive cars. And I walk in that place and it has a distinct smell to it. And it's got graffiti everywhere. And it's got this huge long stage. And the big thing at the Anthrax, which is where all the Revelation bands really like cut their teeth and big hardcore bands, was that there was no bouncers. The stage is like this giant, long, wide open arena. So I got to get my shit together. And I remember I'm in the back dressing room and there's like Killing Time brought like all these like alleyway crew people with them, like Sick of It All and all these other people. And I don't know. And I'm just staring at all these people that I like idolize, hoping that I don't embarrass myself. Right. You know what I mean? At this show. And as soon as the band's setting up, I remember I'm pacing back and forth on the stage, trying to get ready, get myself psyched up. And all I could hear from the crowd is, "Where's Jimmy?" Like over and over.
Oh, yeah. That's fucking, yeah.
Yeah. Over and over and over again. And MP had the coolest intro, which I think they still use. It was awesome intro. It was just a badass intro.
Because I'm saying, I was just to cut you off real quick, because no one could send out a tweet back then that they had a new singer, right?
Yeah, no, people didn't know. And it was just like, and it was listed as MP. And here's this like weird guy with like Guido haircut and like Agnelli jeans and a Gap shirt on, like, with a weird beard, just singing Jimmy songs. And like, and it was, I don't remember if it was good or bad. I just remember it was like unbelievable. Like I never felt like that in my life.
What was the intro?
It was their intro. Like they had a very like a musical intro that was really hot. Like everybody would get, like they knew how to get the crowd going with this intro.
Yeah.
And play the show. And after the show, everybody's great. Everything's cool. And I'm meeting people in other bands, and it's like very awesome. So the MP at the time, the other guys in the band, I think one or two of the guys weren't really that into me, and they weren't really that into staying in the band or something. And I remember like thinking, well, I'm in a Maximum Penalty now. This is going to be great. I'm going to play shows like this all the time. This is going to be awesome. And like none of that was true. They actually had me come back again while they auditioned other people that for like a band practice that I actually was like helping to pay for because I thought I was in the band.
Oh man.
Like I was just like, what did I do wrong? Like, I don't understand. Like I thought I was great. But that was like a temporary thing. And then, Joe Affey of Maximum Penalty was like, listen, we're going to have to change the name. If you're going to stay in the band, we need to change the name. We need to write some new songs. We'll keep some of the songs, but we're going to have to change. Like you can't like be the singer of Maximum Penalty because it's like Jimmy's band. And I was like, yeah, that's cool. So that's how that progressed into calling the band Lament, because him and Mark Sisto were writing very metal like songs. They were watching Hellraiser a lot. And they were like listening to Prong and watching Hellraiser a lot.
Ah, that'll do it.
Yeah. So now this band that's fronted by this really cool black dude in the hardcore scene called Maximum Penalty is going to progress into this more metal kind of band with some with me fronting it.
So like at 20, like you basically, like your ego is like high up there, or kind of like, like you feel good. Like when you drop this or you get that first show and you think that this is what it's going to be. Once they drop that on you, like, were you a little shook about it, or were you looking forward to just doing something different?
Well, the appeal was that I had just jumped like eight rugs in the chain.
Yep.
And I remember when they said they were going to change the name, I was kind of bummed because I was like, oh, like, is anybody going to give a shit? Okay. Like, you know what I mean? Like in my mind, but the material like that Joe was writing was so different, and it was so not like, it was just different. It wasn't like Maximum Penalty. It didn't have that like hip hop overture to it. Like, you know what I mean? It was metal, and I loved metal, and Joe loved metal. And I think he had long hair at the time. And we ended up getting Eric Morgan to play bass, who was like a sick bass player. I think he plays in a band with Sal from Type O now, from The Life of Agony. I forget, Pale Horse Named Death. He went to school with Joe. I knew him when I was like a young metalhead. And we get this drummer who had played in Social D, who since passed away, this guy Jay Osberger, who was playing drums. And the band got very metal. Like we kept some MP stuff since MP wasn't really a thing. So we busted those songs out, but then we really tried to push the name with local shows. So we go back to the Anthrax in May, and it's Killing Time and Sub-Zero and Lament now. And very different vibe, because now I feel like I got my energy up and I know what I'm doing. And I got to shave my beard, and I got like a really cool haircut, and I'm wearing like a Bad Trip t-shirt, and I'm just like, the band's called Lament. Like, you know what I mean?
Were you writing like, so I mean, for someone who's never been in a band and you were singing, someone else's songs the first time around, when they're writing the music, are you writing the melody and the lyrics to this, or did they do that for you for the time being as well?
No, Joe and Mark were writing most of that stuff because they had that stuff on deck. And I think they had whatever happened with Jimmy not happened, I don't know what they would have done, because they ended up Mark came back into the fold, and it was like one of these weird things where I think Joe had like a metal side in his music that he wanted to put out, and he had like a more hardcore oriented riffs better for Jimmy. I wasn't writing anything.
Okay.
I was writing nothing at this point, no melodies, no nothing. They were giving it to me. I did, but I didn't have the credibility to bring it to the table. Like I needed to kind of earn the credibility, and eventually I would write some stuff, and some of the early stuff I wrote was terrible. But
I mean, that's the way it goes.
Write it. I had to write the bad stuff. Like it was bad. Like it never made it to like the Lament records at all. Like by the time the Lament album came up, I wrote like most of the lyrics and most of the melodies by the time Lament got to a full length album. So this is like now 90, 91, and now Lament get to put out a record, a 7-inch, which was a big deal at the time because you went from demos to 7 inches.
Absolutely,
essentially.
yeah.
So we went from demos to 7 inches, and we recorded for a label called Inner Journey, which is a notoriously well-known label to a lot of people because the first things they put out were Clutch, Sub-Zero, and like Lament. These were like, and they put out something else that was pretty big, but from a guy from Rob Fish, I think his name is. He's in that Krishna band. Okay. Oh, it's 108. I think he sings for 108, but he had another called like Hard Response or some shit like that. Like I'm messing up the name, but this label out of Delaware, because we were playing like some Pennsylvania type shows and out-of-state shows. This is like 91. They put out an EP. We called it Drowning Room, and it was like a 4-song EP. And one of the songs, unfortunately, was still an MP song, which would get recycled later on. Again, a song called "I'll Save You," which is a pretty big MP song. But we were like more of like a metal kind of band. I mean, we were, like a metal hardcore. You know what I mean? We could play with metal shows and we could play with hardcore shows.
Yeah, and I mean, what were you guys listening to back then? That
Prong was a big deal.
Okay.
Prong. I think Prong just got signed to a major label. Beg to Differ by Prong was very instrumental in that Lament EP that came out in 91.
Okay.
That was a big thing. Leeway, Prong. I think there was like some cool records by Testament that might have been out at that point.
That was the year punk broke too. I mean, for the most part, like,
yeah,
I don't know if obviously like the Nevermind permeated that world that you guys were in, but I know
it did.
Yeah, it like changed so much. I remember,
Yeah, I mean, and it was a good time to even be like in a band. Like people in the hardcore scene were shitting on Nirvana, but like I think in a retrospective, looking at it now, I don't know that they would do that today. I think at the time, it just because they were mainstream, like hardcore was still very dug in underground at this point, and that was about to change because Nirvana kind of opened the doors for like gangster rap. And industrial music, like, because and you have to remember, I'm like a 21-year-old person, so it's like I'm going to the Limelight, I'm going to the Palladium, I'm going to see bands like Meat Beat Manifesto and Thrill Kill Cult.
Throwback.
Yeah, I'm going to Pearl Jam opening for the Chili Peppers with the Pumpkins on that tour when Pumpkins were on Siamese Dream. Like I'm going to the second Lollapalooza I was at. I'm going to see Ned's Atomic Dustbin.
Jeez.
Like I'm all over the place. Like
you saw Ned's back then?
I saw them twice. I saw them open for Jesus Jones and at the Academy, and then they came back and headlined, and they were fucking amazing.
I love the Academy.
Who was EMF? I saw EMF. I saw a lot of people. Jesus, I mean, this is just. But I'm in a hardcore band too, and I'm playing hardcore shows. Like I'm actively at L'Amour. Playing shows there, going to shows there.
Were you like one of the only people that seemed to be like super accepting of other styles like that around you, or were there others?
Yeah, but I was like one of the only people in college. Like, you know what I mean? Like most of my friends were not in college.
Okay.
And I was only in junior college, and I was considered like a big dorky geek. Like you would have thought I was in Columbia. Like most of my friends were not in school. The ones that were, most of my friends were working. So they had like real jobs, or they were like, not doing much. They were just kind of hanging out. And also like my background in the hardcore scene is very like low key. Like, my family is basically people that were fans that were in bands. Like we didn't have any nefarious, there's no crazy stories. We're not beating people up. We're not getting arrested. We're not on drugs. We're kind of like nerds who like hardcore, and we're like comic book nerds and wrestling nerds who liked hardcore music, who stepped in shit. And we're surrounded by like all these hardcore people who are so legitimate. Like, you know what I mean? That kind of legitimizes us.
And by this time, did Mike, when did Confusion start?
Confusion had already started. So Confusion were playing when Lament was playing.
Okay.
And Confusion were doing great. My brother Mark was he was like, in grade school. Like he was like a kid. Kevin is not booking bands yet, but he's like a big metalhead, guy like going to metal shows and doing like A&R stuff for bands like Spread Eagle.
I loved his episode on This Is Hardcore podcast, because a lot of the shit he mentioned when he said Spread Eagle and Warrior Soul, I was like, those are the two most random things that I remember. It just made me like have a flashback to being like a young kid flipping through like Hit Parader or something.
Mm-hmm.
And
you're from the island, but they had the East Coast Rocker, which was a newspaper that I thought came out of Long Island. I could be wrong. that's how you knew what shows were going on. And then you also had the Village Voice. So you had those two things that came out during the week to let you know what shows were going on. You know, you're a young person, you want to meet people, you're listening to different music. But the hardcore scene was definitely changing at that point. Like there was going to be a very sharp turn that was going to happen in the early 90s in hardcore, which I didn't really see coming because I just either wasn't paying attention. So, you know, this is like the early 90s. We're doing the Lament thing. Joe goes back to Maximum Penalty, breaks up the band. And I think like my life is over at like 21. Like, I'm like, oh, I guess it's over now. I have nothing.
Go back to theater.
Yeah, I'm like, I guess, yeah, I can go back to theater. So I was doing like a college alt rock band with my friends at college, which was actually pretty good, but it was very much like grungy. Like it was like grunge lyrics. And it was like, you know, we just heard 10, like, you know, so now everything's going to sound like the Pearl Jam's 10.
Yeah.
I was doing that, like kind of dejected. And I guess like within a year of doing that, Joe, who I wasn't as close with at that point, calls me up again and was like, well, let's do the band again. And I'm like, oh, you know, I guess. And he's like, yeah, but I don't want to do any of the old material. I want to write all new material and I want to do it with other people. So I was like, okay, I want to write songs. I want to write this time. So this is like 93. And we get a bass player from a band called Machine, which was a big L'Amour metal band. This guy, Jeff Mackey, unbelievable bass player, like Geezer Butler of New York, like sick bass player. And we get Max Capshaw, who was in Sick of It All for like 5 seconds. That was like, and he was in some other bands, but he was in Sick of It All for maybe like, he's in one of the early Sick of It All videos playing drums.
That's 5 seconds more than I was in, so.
Right, but that's what. But also, Sick of It All is like the, you know, even at that time, I'm a huge like Mark and a huge fan.
Absolutely, you said 93.
Huge fan.
Like,
yeah,
93 was like my favorite album. Like Scratch the Surface was like, and this is for me. Like I was never. I'm not like a hardcore guy. I never like I was like on the outskirts, you know, and Scratch the Surface and like, you know, I'm like once
just
I heard
look
that,
around.
I was just like, what the fuck? I'm like, this is like that was the album. So.
Oh, that was a huge deal. So we get this band. So now we're writing all these new songs. We demo some songs, and it's very heavy. It's very metal. But I'm writing everything. I'm writing all the lyrics for the most part. This one, I'm writing all the melodies.
Was that an easy thing as time went on? Because like you're so good like later on with your bands as far as melody that I'm trying to figure out where that started.
I think it's subconscious. It came from trying to keep up with Joe. Like Joe. Like to me, like I'm very biased when it comes to talking about Joe, but like on any, like I've spent so much intimate time with this human being, not even just in bands with him, but in like life, but mostly revolving his craft. And he was just so in tune with his sound and his tone and his ability. Like, you know, he's got such confidence. He doesn't make mistakes. He's like, it's just crazy. And I just want to kind of keep up with him. So it's like, I'm not even on any level of what I can do with what he can do with his ability. I don't even deserve to be in the same conversation. That's how good he is, though. That's the problem, is that he's that good.
Is he one of those people just like you that takes influence from like different places?
Yeah, that's what I said. He was like a guy who grew up on like classic rock and then got into things like Black Sabbath and Maiden and Priest and brought that into this hardcore environment. Like Joe was one of the few people in the hardcore scene I saw that had long hair.
Okay.
Like, and it seems like a silly thing to say, but this is like in the 80s. Like he was just so much his own person. Like I was just in such awe of this guy. Like he was like only a year older than me, but like I knew that he had changed my life. Like had he not allowed me to go into this world, I would just be some idiot in the back. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
like, you know what I mean? And I didn't want to go back to being.
So yeah,
that.
I mean, like he changed the trajectory of your life basically.
For life. Yeah, 100%. And like, you know, he turned 50 last year and I wrote this like really nice thing about him. But I really wanted to put him over as a guitar player more than a person, because I feel like he's never in these conversations of like these amazing, like New York hardcore guitar players that don't get a lot of credit. And I think he should be, but so then we're writing this, we're writing what would become an album for a label called Too Damn Hype, which had put out a magazine and a comp and a bunch of comps that a lot of cool bands were on. And the cool thing about Too Damn Hype was they were a very diverse hardcore label. They were fucking with like a band called Starkweather. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
No.
Just unbelievable. I can't even describe them musically. It's it's like if a Nightmare was a band, like, playing music. They were this brutal, nerdy band from Pennsylvania, with a girl bass player, who, Michelle, I should point out, is married to Mike from All Out War, who's an old friend of mine, a great band. I'm sure you've heard of them.
Yep.
Mike they're just like two of the best people ever. I love them, known them for decades. And we sort of discovered them through this label, and we would have them come and play places like the Crazy Country Club. They would drive out to play. The singer Rennie Resmini was a short, very unassuming, shy guy who had, like, literally when he opened his mouth, hell just came out of his mouth. I mean, it was just, you have to hear this band. I'm not even doing them remotely. I can't compare them to anything. They're not hardcore. They're not metal. They were in a class by themselves. And I wanted to be fucking with bands like that because I was in such awe of him. And they were also friends with, if you're familiar with Only Living Witness.
No.
They're from Boston. Maybe one of the best singers in the hardcore scene of all time, a guy named Jonah Jenkins. Craig Silverman, who is in Agnostic Front, who's been in Agnostic Front for a long time. That's his band.
Okay.
With Jonah was Only Living Witness. So I'm meeting like these people like Starkweather and Only Living Witness and All Out War and Stigmata and all these like post-hardcore kind of bands, but not really post-hardcore, more metal influenced bands, and Crisis. And I'm playing like in that world now, and I'm loving it, and it's great. And I think this is going to be a big thing. We put the record out. We have the record release party at Castle Heights in, I guess, 94 or 95.
Was Kevin booking there by then?
Yeah, Kevin was booking there full time. Mike at this point may have started in Human. I think it may have started around that time, or it was about to start.
Yeah, I think he said 95. I think he said for Inhuman.
Yeah, this is like Inhuman's about to start. And I'm like, I think this is going to be, I think the record's going to do great. I'm getting to do some cool shows. I'm getting to do some like, some decent things. Like we're going out of state and we have a label that's really into us. We like the label.
Did you, like, even at this point, was being like a touring musician like something that you thought of, or was it just like something you just did on the weekends?
It was still something to do on the weekends because hardcore wasn't really a touring industry.
Okay.
Like, you go to Europe, you don't go to California. Like, you know what I mean? It was like you could play DC, Philly, Pennsylvania, Jersey, Connecticut, Delaware, play them. But no one's asking you to go to like Michigan. No one's asking you to go to Arizona. You could probably parlay this to go to Japan. And that was one of the things we were trying to do. We were trying to get to Europe, maybe with other bands on the label. Sub-Zero's on the label. We had done a previous record when we were on a label with Sub-Zero before. Sub-Zero's becoming a pretty big band, and bands that I was friends with, like Marauder, at this point are like a full-fledged band. The old version of Marauder. Demise was a big band from Queens we were playing with. My brother had Confusion, so Dark Side, like these bands were all like, they were there. We had people to play with. We had no shortage of people to play with. And because Lament had the Maximum Penalty name behind it, and we were always getting on a label, we were kind of pushed to the top of the pecking order. There was so many bands, but success was what you would consider success for a band was just getting to play like L'Amour or CB's or put on to open for somebody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like,
yeah,
that was success,
Absolutely. That was like, I often said with my band, we would, this was like our goal. We're like, if we get to play Irving Plaza once,
that sounds like my goal.
And we open up for Sam I Am, like that's it. Like we'll be good. That was always like the goal, which, I mean, they never played Irving Plaza, so that never happened.
Yeah, I don't think they did. But the thing was, like, even then, like, as I look back on it, like we were getting to open some shows, like for some, like Sheer Terror or whatever. And I think we opened for like Rest in Pieces. And we were spending more time playing locally with bands we were friends with than we were opening for bigger people. And there was like a couple of incidences around that time. One of them is actually kind of a really funny story, and I'm going to tell it, even though I really wanted to check with this person before I told the story, but I'm just going to tell it because it's not a bad reflection on them at all. But at the time, Lament was getting some interest. The guy who owned L'Amour's son, this guy Mike Jr., was really into Lament. Like, he liked the band, and he was going to put us on a show that would turn out to be a pretty big show for us. That was a very notorious show. But there was also another incident where Howie Abrams, who worked for Roadrunner at the time, liked the band for like a hot second and reached out to me. And we were on a show with Dog Eat Dog. We played Bond Street Cafe with Confusion and a whole bunch of other bands, maybe Dark Side. And Howie's a great guy. I don't know him very well at all, but you know who he is because he was signing like all these bands to Roadrunner.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'll never forget this for the rest of my life. And Howie, I swear to God, please forgive me for telling the story because I'm sure you don't remember it. But he had said, "I'm going to come see you guys play that show that Dog Eat Dog is playing," because that was one of his bands.
Yep.
So Lament was not like, it was a bit of a sloppy mess. Like it wasn't like some well-oiled machine. We had good songs. We did well when we played, but it wasn't like again, it was not this big well-oiled machine. So we go to play that show, and the show's a little bit of a slop fest. And he's trying, I guess, him or somebody with him is trying to get Dog Eat Dog to go on earlier because the show is not very good. And my brother's band was going to close it. And he was trying to switch spots with Confusion, and my brother is like arguing with them outside, saying, "No, you guys are on the big label. You guys should close the show." So I'm like, "Oh wow, like this is not going well at all." So then I go to talk to Howie, and I was like, "Yeah, what's up, man?" He was like, "Yeah, I'm just going to be honest with you. I thought the band was bigger than this, right? Like I assumed." And then I turn to him without skipping a beat, and I say to him, and I go, "Well, isn't that your job?"
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? And this is me at like 22, like, and now here's this guy who would go and have this amazing career in the music business. And then there's me being a mouthy dick. Now, I privately hated this guy for like 20 years because of that
that's so
conversation.
funny.
I never, and it's because I love him. He's a wonderful guy.
Yeah, he's so cool.
He really is a great man.
I only met him
once. I would love
once.
him to hear that story. He knows my brothers pretty well. Like he knows us. Like, I don't know if he remembers that, but I was so secretly offended by that, which would be the beginning of many bad like decisions. Like I took that so personal that my band was not good enough to get signed to Roadrunner. At the time was signing all these big bands. But I get it. I mean, like it makes sense now, but at the time he offended me. Like I was offended by this guy. Like, who is this guy?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? To tell me this in 94. So that was one of the big factors that really like in my mind that fucked me up. But there was a show when L'Amour was closing. We got asked to play with Life of Agony, who I did not like for many reasons. But they're going back to Crazy Country Club. Have you ever heard of the Crazy Country Club?
No. This is all news to me. So keep going.
So there was this bar in Bay Ridge, Bensonhurst border it was a comedy club called the Crazy Country Club. Now I want to spell the Crazy Country Club. It was KKK.
Oh,
that was part of the joke. Crazy Country Club. Warm beer, lousy food. That was the tagline of this place.
Yeah.
Somewhere in the 80s, they decided on weekday nights, they would let us have hardcore shows there. So we were booking, like we were getting like Raging Angel, because they were called Raging Angel at the time. So you would have like Raging Angel playing there, Confusion playing there, Patterns, which was the precursor band that John LaMacchia was in, to a band called Dead Air that I think you'd really like if you ever heard. They were like a very musical band that he was in, that I think he sang in at that time. But we got to have shows there. And there was this like version of the hardcore scene that was very connected to the city through people through like hanging out at CB's that we knew in like Queens and Manhattan. And then there was like this Bay Ridge hardcore scene of people specifically from like that side of Brooklyn. We were from Sheepshead Bay, the other side of Brooklyn. And it was bands like Life of Agony and Nobody's Perfect. And, there was nothing wrong with any of these guys. But we kind of had a little bit of a chip on our shoulder because we were the people that were going to the shows in Manhattan, like the real hardcore shows. And they were going to like the L'Amour hardcore shows.
Okay.
It was very weird. Like, I know it sounds so silly.
No, it sounds silly, but like back then,
it meant something.
Yeah,
like it meant something.
Yeah, it's the same thing. We all had that story where we look back 20 years later and we're like, yeah, that was stupid, but that's
30.
That's just the way it was. So
yeah, so we never really like, they didn't really get the same like respect that we got because we were friends with people in the city or we knew bands in the city. So Life of Agony was one of those bands, and it sounds very petty, but Life of Agony basically were part of that L'Amour, Bay Ridge, Mill Basin, like hardcore scene not really what we considered the real hardcore scene. So we never really gave them the respect that, like, you know, and they never really gave it back to us. It wasn't until there was like an incident right before they kind of got signed where someone in their band, which was, I'm going to refer to Keith Caputo as Keith Caputo because I don't know Mina. I've never met Keith since he's transitioned. I can't speak on anything that Mina as a human being, but I could speak about the person that was Keith Caputo at the time.
Sure.
Keith Caputo had a terrible reputation. He was a really tiny guy, but he was a big, like, pain in the ass. Like, he's like a troublemaker. He hit somebody that we were friends with at a time where you probably did not want to do that. And it was decreed that he was going to get like the shit kicked out of him for this.
Sure.
And a guy named Giovanni, who's a photographer for like skateboard magazines, who was friends with everybody, called me up and said, "Hey, Joey Zampella wants to talk to you, Joey Z from Life of Agony." And I was like, "Oh, Jesus, I know what this is about." Now, I was not somebody that beat people up. I'm never going to be remembered as that person. But I was certainly around a lot of people that were.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I was like, I was the guy that,
me.
yeah. So you would go to me to kind of get me to get the people to not beat you up. That was kind of, and this is a pattern that would follow me later on in life. So basically, the guitarist from Life Agony, I think they just got signed to Roadrunner, or they just got signed, and I'm already annoyed about that. So he gets me on the phone, and he's like being a sweetheart. He's being like a real, and he goes, "Listen, I know I know your brother, you know, I know, like, you know, I know that I can talk to you." And I go, "Listen, man," I was like, "You know, Keith is a fucking jerk off." I was like, he goes, "Yeah, he's my cousin. You don't understand. He's had a hard life." And I was like, "Yeah, well, you know, the people that are going to beat him up have probably had a hard life." Like, I remember just having that kind of conversation with them. And
you were not backing off, huh?
Well, I did, because I started to feel bad.
Okay.
Because Giovanni was getting in my ear, and this is another person who would be instrumental in my life in a weird way. He was like, "You know, can you just talk to these guys? Like, talk to these guys." So I kind of get it squashed. But more important, this guy Les, who I'm hanging, big guy in the hardcore scene, who was in a band called Patterns. Who I was a roommate of at the time. He got it squashed, and he was like the well-known Brooklyn guy in the hardcore scene. I was just his dopey, you know, friend, like, you know what I mean. So then we run into Joey at a hardcore show at Lemoore, and he gives me a big hug, and he gives Les a big hug. He goes, "Dude, I really appreciate that." I go, "No, man, that's cool." I go, "Don't, it's fine. Let's just leave it alone. It's not a big deal. You know, whatever. It's cool." He had our house number on 29th Street, because a bunch of us all lived in the same house. So I guess a couple weeks go by or whatever, and they're shooting the video for Through and Through. And he was like, they had just recorded the album, and they're shooting the video, and the album's about to come out or whatever. And he calls us up that morning and says, "Can you guys please come to the video shoot?" And I'm in Lament at the time, and I'm like, "No, I'm not. I don't. I'll tell you what, after I make a video for my band, then I'll be in other people's videos. But until I make I swear to God, I said this. I said, until I make a video, I'm not going to be in anybody else's video. I'm going to wait till I can make my own video."
Back when videos cost like $1 zillion to make.
Yeah. So they end up, you know, shooting the video on the Brooklyn Bridge. My brother Mike ends up going, and the album comes out, and I'm thanked on the album, which is very weird, because like, I don't like the band, and I'm not really friends with them, but it says John and Les, and I know that's me and Les. There's nobody else named Les. It's us. But my friends are really into the record. They're really into the band, and I'm still like, I can't separate my hatred of Keith from this at all. You fast forward, and now Lemoore is closing, and they're going to be one of the last 3 bands to play there. They're having 3 final shows, and one of them is Type O headlining, one of them is Biohazard, and one of them is Life of Agony. Well, I get asked to open for them at that final show.
Okay.
And it's a big deal. It's like a sold out show. It's the end of like the Lemoore era, and our record had just come out, and we're about to do some press for the record, which existed of like doing like 2 radio interviews, like doing like Crucial Chaos and doing SOU. I'm doing SOU that Sunday, and this show is on like a Saturday. So it's Shelter, Life of Agony, and Lament at Lemoore. Right? This is a fucking huge show. Shelter did not become a big bit. They didn't get signed yet to Roadrunner. And we do that. And it's great. It's fun. My brother Mark is now a little kid diving and moshing at the hardcore scene at like 11, 12 years old, 13 years old, not even. And it's awesome. And I'm feeling like we're doing really well. While we're at that show, an ambulance pulls up and I'm not paying. I'm drunk outside. I'm drunk a lot at that point. And the kid gets taken out, literally gushing blood from his nose and his mouth and head thing on. This is during Life of Agony set. And I don't know anything about this. Like, I'm outside with all my friends. Like, we really don't know what happened. And we come to find out that a bouncer pushed a kid off of the stage. The kid cracked his head open and dies.
Oh my God.
Very famous story. Like, it was all over the news. It was in the paper.
Oh.
I was not. So I go on, I'm on, WSOU, obviously, right? Seton Hall, the radio. They have the.
Sure.
So I'm doing a radio interview on there the next day with Joe, and we're promoting the album. And we just played the show at Life of Agony, and I think we have some shows coming up. Like, we have like a weekend we're doing Sub-Zero or something. I don't know. And somebody at SOU is asking me about violence at shows, and I'm just like, yeah, the shows are getting a lot more violent. I'm not going to say they're not. They're getting pretty violent. But you know what? I don't think the band's responsible. Like, I mean, how could you? And I know nothing about any of this, and neither does the SOU person doing the interview. And the next day, I think it was in the Post and the Daily News, I'm at my deli that I'm working at. My dad calls me and says, "Did you see you're in the paper?"
Oh my God.
And I'm like, "No." Like, he goes, "That show you played, the kid died. A kid from Jersey died at that show." And they mentioned all the bands. And they're not making a distinction between, like, they just said the show, this is who played the show, whoever the opening band was, Lament. The bands were Life of Agony, Shelter, Lament, blah, blah. So now I'm getting a little nervous because I'm like, oh, shit. So my father is like, you should find out, like, what's going on with this, because you could get in a lot of trouble. Like, you could get sued, you know? And that week, the Geraldo Rivero show calls my parents' house, thinking I still live with my parents.
This is ridiculous.
And they ask if I want to come on the show because my band was on the show.
Yeah.
And do I want to come and do a panel with other people about, like, violence in music? And my father was like, absolutely not. Do not do this. Don't even respond. My father, like, runs interference for this. Now, funny thing, fast forward, they taped this show and they couldn't get anybody, like, from New York or whatever to do the panel. So they get this unknown musician from Florida called Marilyn Manson to do it.
Wow.
And he's on there talking about violence at shows. And I'm like, who the fuck is this guy? Like, this guy wasn't even at the show.
Was he Brian Warner or Marilyn
No,
Manson?
he was Marilyn Manson. Him and Twiggy did it. They were in full gear. This is 1994 or 95.
Okay. Yeah, the record,
and
the first record came out.
Yeah. So that was like, that was going on in the hardcore scene at the time. But I'm just like, man, I was just like, holy fuck. And I was like,
did you want to do it?
I did want to do it, but I was probably, if I did it, it would have been a huge mistake. My father was just worried that so the family sued, but the district attorney filed attempted murder charges against the bouncer.
Wow.
The bouncer went up for murder. This is all famous shit. Like, people still talk about this to this day. So I have that show on videotape somewhere. And I just remember my dad being very litigious about the whole thing. Like, he was just like, don't tell anybody you have the show on video. And I was like, but I only have my set on video. Like, I don't even have, like, anything else.
Yeah.
Like, he didn't die during my show. The kid probably doesn't know who the fuck I am. Like, this poor bastard, this kid got pushed off the stage by the bouncer, cracked his head open, bled to death, like hemorrhaged, and died. So that was like what was going on in the hardcore scene for me at the time. So it's like, I can't, like, I'm trying to get the band to do more things. And I have a friend at MTV who got Lament on some MTV stuff musically. He produced, my friend Gil Colon, he produced MTV Sports. I don't know if you remember that, or you're too young, but
come on, Dan Cortez.
Oh, I don't know. Well, he produced that. So we were on that show. He also got us on a bumper, like what they call a bumper. Do you know what a bumper is?
Of course, yeah.
So one of the songs from the Levitate Lament album, and music from that, none of my lyrics, by the way, perfectly, nothing I sing is on any of this stuff, but the music was a bumper for something, maybe like a VMAs, or it might have been the MTV Movie Awards.
Yeah, bumpers are great. Anytime I hear
bumpers, like, are great.
Stern would play, like, Quicksand, and I'm like, who the fuck used this as a bumper?
Yeah, I heard Quicksand on an NBA playoff bumper a bunch of years ago, and I was like, holy shit. So there was a bumper for that, and then Dean Cain. Do you know who Dean Cain is?
Of course.
Dean Cain was trying to do a ripoff of MTV Sports for ABC because he had a hit ABC show.
Yep.
So Dean Cain did an extreme sports special where they had 2 Lament songs in the extreme sports special with Dean Cain, which I was very proud of. But
what are those checks like now?
I don't. We signed them away for free. Like we
Oh,
were able
okay,
to give them away for free.
okay.
They were all, and it was music, and it was Dean King. Like he was, I think he jumped out of an airplane with Ian Zaring or some shit. I don't even know. Like it was something so whack. But I was just like, yeah, we'll take it. Like this is great. Like you know what I mean? Like whatever is going on. But then like even like you get like to this plateau, and then like clubs start closing, and the hardcore scene starts changing like on a dime. And like bands I didn't really like Life of Agony and Biohazard, are like these huge bands now.
Huge.
And I am very publicly talking about how much I don't like these people, or I don't like these bands, primarily because like, not because I'm jealous, but because like they didn't represent the hardcore scene to me. Like I thought Leeway and Shitera and Raw Deal and Killing Time and Gorilla Biscuits were the hardcore scene. Like I didn't want the big thing to come out of the hardcore scene to be guys who weren't even at CBGBs. You know what I mean? So obviously I'm in the minority of that opinion. That was obviously not the proper opinion, but I just remember, I remember seeing the Life of Agony video and then the Biohazard video. And I'm just thinking like, yeah, I'm not going to work out here. Like, I'm just like, because I'm not, everybody just kind of went with those bands and decided that these were going to be like the best bands ever, and we're going to be in all the videos and hang out and play, go see them all the time and make them famous.
It like influenced that sound later on too, and also specifically those two bands for Long Island as well. Man, we would hang out in parking lots, and I tell you, every car in 93, 94 had Life of Agony, River Runs Red, and Biohazard's fucking Urban Discipline. Like,
well, you know, it's funny. I gave an interview to a fanzine. I can't remember the name of the fanzine, and I just bashed Biohazard to death. Like because I had an incident with Bobby, like that. Like he tried to fight me, which again, I am just not somebody you try to fight. It's like a pointless exercise. Like no one is ever going to mistake me for that person.
Yeah.
Something happened, and Bobby was coming out of Lemoore with a friend, a guy we did not like, and a couple of girls. And one of the girls dropped her purse and all of her shit spilled. And I'm in a crowd of people that are way more nefarious and very dangerous, quite frankly, people that you don't want to have a problem with. I'm not going to name drop, but they're just not like, they're not people that you want a problem with. Sure. And Bobby, the girl's purse spills, and we're like, oh, like we're laughing, and I'm giggling. I'm like high as fuck. I'm drunk. I'm outside of Lemoore in a Carhartt giant coat and a fucking like smoking a blunt with these dudes. And Bobby goes, "What did you say?" And one of the other dudes, who is like a pretty well-known hardcore person, goes, "Are you talking to me?" He goes, "Oh no, I'm not talking to you. I'm not talking to you." And then he goes, "Are you talking to me?" He goes, "No, him." And like he points to the whole crowd and singles me out while everyone else is laughing. And I was just like. I was like, yeah, he went down the list and said, oh, that dude I can't say anything to. Yeah. That guy I can't say anything to. That guy I'm going to say something to. And then before I could say anything, one of the people I'm with jumps in between us and pulls a hammer out and was like, who you know you're fucking talking to? And like screaming at Bob. And Bob has a pretty big band at this point, right?
Yeah.
And they walk away. And I was just like, God, that dude's a piece of shit. Right? You know what I mean? So I'm bashing them in magazines. I'm bashing them, but they're getting so popular. And like people who I thought didn't like them now like them a lot. Like, you know what I mean? And I was just like, oh, this is not going to work for me. So fast forward at the height of all of this, my friend Gil Colon, MTV guy, one of my closest friends at that point in my life, says, hey, do you want to come? White Zombie's playing with Pantera, and I got to go with Tommy Victor. I'm driving Tommy Victor there because he's friends with Tommy, and I love Prong. And I'm like, yeah, I've never met Prong before. I've always wanted to meet Tommy. This is going to be great. Well, Tommy's living in Brooklyn. We're going to go with him. It's at the the Hammerstein, and we're on the guest list, so don't worry. Blah blah. I go, this is amazing. He goes, yeah, it's just one thing though. And I go, what? He goes, well, someone else is coming. And I was like, who's coming with? He goes, Billy from Biohazard. Now I don't know Billy. And Billy was probably the only guy I kind of like. Him and Danny, I actually kind of liked.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, that's cool. I've never said anything bad about Billy. And he was like, yeah, but I know you say a lot of stuff about the band, and I don't know if he knows you or if he knows like you're like somebody who like talks shit, whatever. And I'm like, yeah, but I never said anything bad about Billy. I just thought Evan was a goof, and I thought Bobby was a moron. So, but that was it. Like I didn't like the band. So now I got to go to this thing like with him, and this is like all within that year time period. So we pick up Tommy. And I jump in the back seat, and Tommy's in the front seat with Gil, and Gil's got like a 2-seat Cutlass or something. And then we go to pick up we go to pick up Billy, right? And Billy gets in the car, and and this is before their album came out. This is before the big record came out. I'll tell you how I remember this. So Billy is like the nicest guy ever. Like, he could not be nicer. And I'm just like almost a little embarrassed with how much shit I talk. And then Billy goes, "Hey, I brought the remixes of the album for Warner Brothers if you guys want to hear it." And I'm like, "Oh, Jesus, like, is he really doing this?" And Tommy's like, "Yeah, put it on." So it's like I'm in the car now with like the producer from MTV, the guy from Prong, the guy from Biohazard, and me. Like, like I'm sitting in the back of the car. And he's puts on, I guess, Tales from the Hard Side, which was called Carjack. And I just remember Billy's very involved explanation. This song's about a carjacking. Like, you know what I mean? I was just like,
oh, so
like he's talking about like, this is, what year is this?
Wow, that had to be 95.
Yeah, this was a big year. So, and he has, it's freezing out, right? And he has like, I'm freezing to death. And I got this giant coat on, and I know it's going to be hot in Roseland. It was Roseland, not Hammerstein. I think it was Roseland. And I'm going to check my coat. Yeah, it was Roseland. Because the VIP, if you remember, Roseland was on the elevated side stage.
Yep.
So the VIP set, yeah. So I go to get out of the car with Billy, and he goes, "Hey, man, I don't think you're going to want this, but I brought this anyway, but I don't think you're going to want it." And that's when I knew he knew, like, who I was. And I was like, "What is it?" And it was like a Biohazard ski cap with stickers on it.
Yeah.
And I go, "Oh, you didn't have to do that, man." He goes, "Yeah, I mean, you don't have to take it if you don't want." I go, "Billy, man, absolutely. He was such a nice guy. He was such a nice guy." And I just remember feeling so uncomfortable because he couldn't have been a nicer guy, right? Like, he just couldn't have been a nicer guy. And, but I refused to put the hat on. So it was just like, I couldn't put the hat on.
It's so funny that you were so vocal about it. Because, I mean, you just don't seem like you're, I don't know. Well,
it rubbed me the wrong way because I did have that incident with Bobby. And then, like, I felt like my band was getting passed over for people, like, even though my band was like really in the hardcore scene, by people that were not in the hardcore scene, and I was like, well, like, what, like, it was like jealousy. It was really like a jealousy thing, but I also didn't like them musically anyway. Like, I remember River Runs Red, and I'm like, I remember Joey calling me up going, "We just got Keith singing lessons from the guy who teaches James Brown. And it's like $150 an hour." This is like 1994. And in my mind, I'm like, "Oh, so you guys bought like singing lessons for him?" And like, because I had always heard they were like rich kids, like, which it wasn't really true.
That's
but
how much I paid for mine an hour.
Yeah, it was in 94.
No. Oh no, yeah, 94. So probably in like 2000 something, 2000.
Yeah, this was like 94, and I was like, "Oh, I didn't know Keith could sing." And like, I just never really liked like Keith, and I didn't like Bobby, and I just like, it was personal to me, like, because I was like, I'm doing this shit too. People like, but hindsight, it's jealousy. Like, it's a jealousy thing, and of course it's jealousy. And it's like, people are like, "Oh, you're just jealous." I'm like, "Yeah, well, what the fuck's wrong with being jealous?"
Yeah.
Like, when
true.
did that become something to apologize for? Like, what, I should celebrate people I don't like success that overtakes me? Yeah. Like, why should I do that? So around that time, that was kind of, Lament was dying. Like, it was kind of ending. Joe was going back to MP
How long were you guys a band for?
So Lament was a band from like 90 to 91 to 92, and then back again in like 93 to 96, 95. Okay. So it was like 95. Sure. And then at that point, like, Biohazard's like Jesus, and like Life of Agony's like, St. Peter and Typo Negative. Like, these bands just completely took over music for people. And I was done. I just felt like, you know what? Hardcore scene was very different for me. Like, I wasn't like in that gangsta like vibe. Like, even though I really wanted to be a part of that, but I couldn't pull that off. I just was not that person.
And at this point, did Shutdown, Mark's band, start? And
Shutdown is kind of starting. They're still very young, and then Humanist started already. And Mike has a lot of credentials because of being in Confusion for all that time. Okay. So I step out, I get a job, I get an apartment, and I'm just like, I'm like a ghost. Like, I show up to almost nothing. I'm not really involved in a lot of stuff going on in the hardcore scene at that point because I wasn't really playing. You know what I mean? I was pissed. But I was pissed at myself. I just didn't realize that it was kind of probably partly my fault. Like, I'm carrying grudges against labels and record people and guys in bands who I don't really know. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
that's an interesting angle. Yeah, everything that you've said for the most part. Yeah, I guess if
but you don't realize. But Sam, at the time, it's very destructive. Like, if your excuse for not being successful in music is because you're mad at Bobby from Biohazard, I mean, like, or Howie Abrams, I mean, like, this is this is not normal. Like, this is not like a normal person doesn't process things like that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that was it for me. I was gone. I was out.
You were done. So you're done with like music, done with, and then what
Done with everything.
changed?
I got a phone call in late '96 from a friend named John Zito, who is an actor, but he sang in a band called Crusade. He was a hardcore guy that we knew from Brooklyn. He calls me up and goes, "Listen, I got your number from your brother. I don't know if you care or not, but I know these guys in Westchester. They're trying to start a band, and they want to do like a post-hardcore band. And I should reiterate, like, the post-hardcore thing was sort of like this new thing that was created in the early '90s, like when Quicksand and Into Another became a band, and Shift. You know, there was this moniker called post-hardcore. It was basically people in the hardcore scene not doing hardcore music, but doing very good music. And like, I always thought Quicksand were the greatest. Quicksand to me are the greatest band in the world.
Walter is one of the best songwriters
Genius.
ever.
Genius. And Richie Birkenhead from Into Another, one of the best singers I've ever seen in my life, whether it was Underdog or Into Another. Walter's a goddamn genius. Shift, I was not a fan of, but Orange 9mm, Burn.
Handsome.
Like, you know, Handsome, yeah. Like, yeah. Tom Capone was in that band with Petey Hines. And so there was like that kind of happened, and then it kind of stopped in New York. Like, it wasn't really a thing anymore. And I remember the end of Lament, people telling me, "Hey, you should really befriend Josh from Shift, because you guys kind of like a post-hardcore band." And I'm like, "We don't sound anything like Shift. Like, that guy's not going to like my fucking band." Like, you know what I mean? Like, you know, that's not even a good fit, because they were like, "Oh, Lament's not really a hardcore band. It's like a post-hardcore band." I was like, "Well, Quicksand's too high on the pay grade.
Yeah.
So they're not going to sniff my balls." Like, you know what I mean? So
Helmet was winding down by
Helmet was winding down at that point. That peaked. Like, when I was playing in Lament, that was a peak thing. So none of that was really picking up like on a national scale. You know what I mean? And I wasn't really paying attention to Incubus or the Deftones or Far at this point. Those were the other side of the earth for me. So he goes, "Yeah, these guys are trying to do a post-hardcore band, but they really want like a singer. And there's like not a lot of people who actually sing. And I think you'd be perfect for it." So I'm like, "Oh, you know, I don't know, John. Like, I mean, are they any good?" And he was like, "Well, I've heard the music. It's pretty good. I think you'd like it. I think you could do good with it." And I was like, "I guess give him my number and have him mail me the tape, and I'll listen to it." So the guys in the band are three guys I've never heard of. Two of them are in a band called Awkward Thought, which was like a hardcore band that I never heard of, that was playing like ABC No Rio at the time, which was not like a place that I associated a lot with, like the hardcore that I was listening to.
Sure.
So I get this guy Rob on the phone, this guy Rob Seal, and he's like, "Yeah, I wrote the songs with John Franco. We know your brother, and don't you have another brother? About which brother are you?" And there's like a lot of confusion. So I was like, "Yeah, I was in Lament." And blah, blah, blah. "Yeah, you were in Maximum Penalty, blah, blah." So he's like, "Yeah, man, I really would love you to check it out." So he sends me 3 songs, and they're like, 8-track songs on a cassette tape, and I get it like a week and a half later, and I really like it. So I write the songs right away. I write all the melodies, the lyrics, boom, boom, boom.
Oh, really? So they send you a tape with 3 songs.
A tape with 3 songs.
And automatically, because like when I hear stuff, I don't know if you're the same way. Like if I hear a piece of music, like just my mind just goes to a melody immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Is it the same for you?
I don't know if you're like this, but usually the first one is the keeper. The first melody is the keeper. The first one is the keeper for me. And like, he sends me these 3 songs, and 2 of them sound similar. One of them is a little bit more like a rock kind of song. It's like, like, and I'm like, "Oh, that's catchy." So I write the songs. And are you familiar with Ultrasound Studios in Manhattan? It was in the music building.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Ultrasound was where I used to rehearse with Lament. And I book Ultrasound. We're going to do a 2-hour thing. We're going to see if this works out. So the guys show up, and like 2 of them have like baby fat, like they seem very young. And the other guy who plays bass is a guy named John Franco, who actually owns a record label. He's been involved in the hardcore scene for like 30 years too. He's a great guy, very well-known person, worked with a lot of bands, does a lot of merch, has a label, I think, called Dead City now. Awesome guy, but I don't know John. And the drummer is this guy Wayne, and this guy Rob Seal. He just got out of high school. He's like maybe 20 years old, 21 years old. So I'm about 27, but I'm like, hard 27. Like, I'm a fucking mess. And I'm like, I really am, from all the years of hanging out and playing and drinking and smoking. And, I'm a little chub, but I'm not in terrible. My voice is in pretty good shape because I haven't sang in a while. So we go to do the songs, and I could just see in their faces that they were like, "Oh my god, like this is like this is amazing."
Okay.
They couldn't believe it, and we just do the same 3 songs like 7 or 8 times in 2 hour span. At the end of the practice, they're like, "Yo, do you want to do this?" And I was like, "Do you got more material?" And Rob's like, "Yeah, I got tons of material. Like, I got tons of songs." And I was like, "All right, yeah, let's do it. Fuck it." So we start rehearsing there on a regular basis for like a couple of months. And unbeknownst to me, like Inhuman is becoming very popular. Castle Heights is doing great. My brother Mark is in a band already.
That's right.
Shutdown's doing great.
Yeah. So figure like just so people know, your brother Mike is in Inhuman, and then your other brother is running Castle Heights, and now Mark
My brother
is in
Kevin.
Kevin, and now
and then Shutdown.
Yeah, so like the dynasty is starting to form.
Yeah, but I don't live in the same house with them. They all live in the same house, and I don't live there.
And there's no internet.
No, there's no internet. So
Yeah.
everything is over the phone. And so I'm building this band up, and I was like, well, we should probably record at least these 3 songs because we got them down pretty tight. Jimmy Williams from MP owns a studio called Night Owl right across the street from Ultrasound, the music building block there with like 32nd Street between 7th and 8th or something like that. And I go, Jimmy, can you produce this for me? He goes, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Because I've become very good friends with him from even dealing with MP, even though the circumstances were shitty at the time and they were rough at the beginning. MP becomes an established band. There's no hard feelings. I rekindle my friendship with Joe. Everything's wonderful. He's doing his thing. I'm doing my thing. Everything's great. So Jimmy produces the songs with this guy, Paul, who's his partner, this British guy. They own Night Owl together. And he was like, oh, this stuff's pretty good. And he was like, I could tell he was like surprised. I was like, oh, thanks. I was like, well, if Jimmy thinks they're pretty good, maybe they're actually pretty good. But he could have just been saying that to be polite.
Sure.
So now we got to pick a name, and we're using names that are constantly used. Like we're putting like names of bands, established bands name on the demo, and we're giving the demo to people. And so we're like
what, like Metallica?
Fueled. It was like fueled and lift or lifted, and it's like constantly like a problem. And we go to play Castle Heights. I can't remember who we're opening for, but we're going on like second. That was the big thing. It was like, I'm not going to go on first, but I'll go on second. I don't care how many bands are on the show. I just can't go on first. And my brother Kevin was like, well, you go on second and you'll like it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's the best you're going to get here. Like, you don't even have a fucking name. And we had like 6 songs. And God forbid we got extra time. We had a version of, I don't know if you like Sinead O'Connor, but
yeah.
I'm a huge fan. We did like a weird version of I Am Stretched on Your Grave that we could drag out. That was like the bonus song. So we're playing these shows, like these small shows, and it's going pretty good. But John Franco is like singing an Awkward Thought. And he's like, listen, I think I can go to Europe with my band. I don't think I can play bass in this anymore. And I was like, oh, fuck, here we go. But the other guy's like, yeah, we got this guy, Ray. He was in a hardcore band. We know him. He's from Yonkers. He wants to play bass in the band. He's really a guitar player, but he'll play bass. So this guy, Ray, comes in. Ray's great. I like Ray a lot. I think Ray is like one of my good friends immediately. Everything's wonderful. Tonystark. I couldn't tell you why. I was a comic book person. These guys weren't comic book people. I just thought it would be funny between like Wu-Tang and just to put the name together. And I thought, well, if you have to change it, we can call it like TS13 or something. Was
Ghostface your favorite? Is that why?
No, he wasn't though. But I like that they reference like wrestling and comics, and that was kind of like cool for me because I like those things. So we called the band Tonystark, put it all in one word. This is years before any kind of Marvel movie or anything like that would happen. And lo and behold, we start getting better quality shows now because my brothers have good connections. And a friend of mine was friends with a guy who owned a label at Jersey called Resurrection AD Records. And he basically, was putting out like mostly traditional hardcore records. So he goes, hey, give me your demo tape. I'm going to give it to my friend just to see if he likes it. So we had the 3 songs on the demo, which sounded great. They were brutal, but they were very like Orange 9mm kind of sounding, like, they had that kind of bite to it.
Sure.
Lo and behold, I probably if I heard it now, I wouldn't like it. But at the time I thought it was good. And
what was the last time you heard it?
Oh, I couldn't tell you the last time I heard the demo, but a long time. I don't think I heard it this century. And he calls me up and was like, hey, is your brother Mark Scondotto? And I go, yeah, it's one of my brothers. He goes, and is your other brother Mike Scondotto? I go, yeah. He goes, man, I wanted to sign your brother's band in the worst way. Like, and my brother, I think, was at the time maybe on Rick to Life's label, or he was on the label from Kevin Gill's label. I don't know whose label. This is before they go to Victory.
Yeah.
And he was like, man, I wanted to sign your brother so fucking bad. I was in on that early because I love youth crew music. My brother Mark was playing like Youth of Today, youth crew style music. So he goes, you guys are really good, man. And he was like, what are you looking for? And I was like, honestly, just to put out like a 5-song EP, to get on better quality shows, because we're going on these very small local shows, and it's fine, but it's not really like where I want it to be. So he was like, all right, well, look for a studio, and we'll figure out a budget. So I don't know how we stumbled onto the studio, but there was a studio called Big Blue Meanie. Great studio at the time. They had a studio in Jersey and a studio in Utica. And the thing was, you go out to Big Blue Meanie, you stay in Utica, you record, you sleep there, and then you leave with the finished record.
Oh, wow.
So we're gearing up to go to Utica to go do this record. And we drive out to Utica, and it's like almost the winter time, and it's freezing. I mean, it's got nowhere. It's like a pizzeria and a strip club are the only places near this goddamn studio. Not bad. So we go. This is like 96 into 97, and we've been around for like 6 months. Not even 6 months. And I'm in a studio recording upstate New York, making a record. This is awesome. We turn the record in. Now on the record version of these songs, I'm singing, like I'm actually singing. But like when we track the songs, I'm kind of screaming the songs. So when we go out to Utica, I'm singing all the songs, right? And this is just what I'm doing. I'm singing the songs. But live and like tracking them, I had a lot more bite to them. So I don't know if it was just my own poor health or my own bad quality in my voice, whatever. But when we get to Utica, I have to kind of sing these in like a singing head voice because I don't really have the bite to go forward with the way I want to do the recording. And we just have to do it. So we record 6 songs. I think only 5 make the record, and we have 1 from the demo, 2 of them from the demo as a bonus track if you extra extended play the song. And the guys in the band are pissed. Like, they're like, especially Ray, because he was like, oh, like you didn't sing like the songs like the way you sing them like when we play live. I go, yeah, it's just like, I don't know. I thought I would try singing them instead. Like, you know what I mean? Rather than screaming them. And they didn't like that. Like he didn't like it, and the label didn't like it. But you couldn't argue with that. May have been the better move, because I felt like, hey man, like we're not really. This isn't like a hardcore band. Like, why am I screaming these songs? Like, I could sing them. Let me sing them.
Interesting.
One of the songs on the record, which would actually really change my life, was a song I wrote called Trailer. I'm living in Manhattan with my friend, and his girlfriend is such a pain in the ass. Like, she sucks so bad. And it just was my inspiration to write this song. You know what I mean? And all the lyrics are about like him and his girlfriend. I never told him about this. And it's a good song. I mean, like the music, Rob wrote this beautiful thing in the beginning, and the label is pissed, but they really believe in Trailer. Like, they really believe in the song. So he pays a ton of money to not only get the record released, but to get it charted. Are you familiar with charting?
No, maybe.
So back in the day, before the internet music, you paid a third party to a sum of money to send your records and to chart the progress of those records.
Okay.
And then they would send you a spreadsheet. And on top of that, he was a skateboard guy at heart, the guy on the label, this guy, AJ Falvo. And he was a Jersey skater kid. And he was, do you know who Lance Mountain is?
Lance who?
Lance Mountain?
No.
He's a famous BMX guy.
Okay.
Anyway, he had a series of VHS tapes called 311. They were like monthly or quarterly magazine style. Like, it was, you would buy BMX. I don't know if you ever skated or BMX.
I was more skateboarding than BMX.
So you would buy like a Bones Brigade video, like that kind of thing?
Yep.
Okay, so this was the BMX version of that. So on those videos, they would have bands play songs. And it was bands like the Deftones or POD or whatever the fuck. So he paid money to get Trailer onto one of those 311 tapes. And it was basically high-end BMX people BMXing to my song. to the full song, like a video. And this changes everything. Like everything changes now because the charting from that song specifically, even though some of the other songs were a little weak, but the charting for that is through the roof. Like it's the thing that everybody, and now people are really into the song. The song is charting well through McGaffey, which was a charting service. CMJ gives that record a favorable review. I know you're familiar with CMJ. But,
yeah, of course.
Yeah, so I'm like, this is great. Amazing, right? So now we're starting to do better things. We're starting to get some looks from other labels or contacting Resurrection about Tonystark. Now, this is where things get really crazy. So Kevin, my brother, is tour managing a little bit. Phone call from Ken Creedy. Do you know Ken Creedy?
No.
He was like a manager. He managed Life of Agony, Typo, and Biohazard. You ever heard of him? No. So he was he booked Lemore's, but he was a manager. He said, hey, Keith Caputo just got thrown out of Life of Agony. He's doing a solo tour, and he's got a band, and I want them to play Castle Heights. And Kevin was like, well, I got a great idea. Why don't we have them play with my brother John's band? Like, no one knows about my feelings about Keith at this point. And because they're blowing up. And then Ken, I guess, hears about Tonystark. It was like, that sounds perfect. They could play right before Keith. You know, the band's called Absolute Bloom. So Kevin's like, listen, I got an idea in my head. I think you should attach yourself to this guy because he's a former hardcore guy doing different music. You're a former hardcore guy doing different music. You're both from Brooklyn. Let me represent you with this and see what I could do. So I talked to the band, and the band's like, yeah, that sounds great. They're in awe of Keith Caputo. Like, they think Life of Agony is the greatest band in the world.
It's so funny.
So I get that Kevin gets the package from Absolute Bloom. I bring it into the studio to play for the guys. And it's not very good. Like, I don't know if you've ever heard it. Have you ever heard it?
Not that one. Nope.
Yeah. So there's a reason why. So, but it's not very good. It's the music's kind of weak. It's just basically Keith spouting off, you know, and hitting these high notes and holding notes for very long periods of time. So I remember playing it for the band, and like half the band is like, this is terrible. And I'm like, yeah, but it's whatever. And now I'm like, you know, I kind of still hate Keith's guts. So, but let me see how this goes. So we go to do the show, and I don't see Keith all night, and we do our set, and we're getting pretty well received. And then Absolute Bloom go to play with Keith, and you know, it's good. It's not great, but it's good. There's a lot of people there, a lot of girls there, ton of girls. And Ken Creedy's outside talking to my brother Kevin, like they're both Reuben Kincaid, you know, from the Partridge Family. And I'm like, I think I know what happens next here. And I was like, wouldn't it be crazy if now I finally get to do some stuff with Keith like this, you know, in this environment? So the show's over, they're in the back, and we go in the back, and Keith sees me, and he goes, hey. And I go, hey. And he goes, what's up? And I go, nothing. I go, you seem happy. And he goes, I am happy. And I go, yeah, you seem a lot happier now than when I used to know you. And he goes, you know what? You're probably right. And we just start having a nice conversation. And he goes, so what do you think about this thing? I think we might hit the road together. What do you think about that? And I go, I think it's great. And he was like, well, if you guys are down, I we loved watching you. And I knew it was bullshit because Keith wasn't there when we played. But like, you know what I mean? So
that's such a show move.
I knew it. So he was like, you know, we have some more stuff going on in the city. I would get you on it if you want to get on it, but you got to talk to Ken. I go, well, I'll have Kevin do that. So my brother Kevin is like, I fucking told you. I fucking told you. They're going to do 2 weeks. They're going to do a tour for 2 weeks. They want you guys to come with them. And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, this is perfect. He goes, John, I'm telling you, this is it. This is going to change everything. This is going to change everything for you guys. I was like, okay. So I remember very distinctly, I thought the guitar player was not very good. I just remember, and this is a key point in the story. The bass player was a guy named Billy Kelly, who was in a bunch of bands. He passed away a bunch of years ago. He's very good friends with my brother and the guys in the Human. And the drummer was a guy named Mike D'Agostino, who was a doctor, who didn't probably really need to be doing this band, but Keith was a famous guy. So the tour, we're doing 2 weeks. Kevin is tour managing it. The record is out. we're going to start sending tour packages. I forget where the tour was. It was through the Northeast, but it wasn't anything local. It was like, went to like Kentucky and places like that. And I'm like, this is going to be great. I can't wait. You know, it's like in 6 weeks or something like that. So 2 weeks come by and we're rehearsing for the tour and we're trying to get ourselves together and we want to be really tight and, you know, we want to do a good job. And Kevin is like, you know, I can't get Ken on the phone. I don't know what's going on. Like I know I'm supposed to get the final dates. Kevin had a fax machine. Like Kevin was running like a club. So he's waiting to get the dates from Mike D'Agostino, the drummer. And all of this stuff is happening. And I think we're going to do like maybe a kickoff at Castle Heights or something like that. I can't remember the story. Lo and behold, Keith Caputo fires the whole band, breaks the band up before the record comes out, and leaves and goes to Amsterdam and moves to Amsterdam.
Wow.
And we don't know any of this. There's no internet. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
yeah, of course.
This is, you know, so this is 97. And now, mind you, I have like, this was a big deal for us. The label is going to put some money behind the tour. Like everyone's thinking this is the thing that's going to put Tonystark on the map, right? And now it's not happening. Like it's just not happening at all. There's no tour. There's no nothing. There's no band. So fast forward, like maybe like a week after this falls to pieces, I'm super upset. I'm mad at Keith. I'm mad at myself. I get a phone call from this guy, Giovanni, the photographer, who is the guy who introduced me to Joey Zampella all those years earlier, and says, hey, can you talk? I want to talk. Somebody wants to talk to you. And I'm thinking it might be Keith. So I'm like, oh, it better not be Keith. But I know Keith's in Amsterdam. It's the guitar player, Pete. And Giovanni shows up to my condo in Bay Ridge. And they're basically, Pete's like, listen, I thought your band was amazing. I love that song Trailer. I think it's fucking beautiful. I learned it as soon as I got it. Are you guys looking for a second guitar player? And I'm like, yo, man, I'm looking for a second guitar player. I wanted to go on this tour with you guys. And he was like, well, I'm just saying, I'm available. I love the band. I think you guys need a lead guitar player. And he was right. We kind of did need a second guitar player. So the guys were just, you know, mad about the tour, but they liked the idea that this guy wanted to play and he played with Keith. So that was a big up for them. So Pete Frigletti joins Tonystark. And now Tonystark is a 5-piece. And now he's bringing in parts of songs that they had with Keith that I thought weren't very good. And we're restructuring them. And he could sing. And that was the part that Keith's band had like 3-part harmony. So now I'm singing and writing songs with this dude, who I didn't think was very good, with Tonystark. While all this is going on, I get an offer from a label called MIA from a guy named Steve Sinclair, who had some, you know, success in the music business. He says, hey, I want to bring you guys in for a meeting. I want to talk to you guys. I want to sign the band. Wow. So they had an office in Soho on like Lispenard Street or whatever. And I remember we all went. And Pete had just joined the band a few months earlier, but now the band's cooking. Like we got shit on the table. Like we're playing good local shows. We're playing like the skate thing. We're doing the Tonystark name for the Trailer songs picking up. So when we go in there to have the meeting with MIA, there's 2 A&R guys there. They're very young. One of them is beyond over the moon. He's got like the whole press packet out. He puts Trailer on in the office. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, why is Trailer on in this fucking office? So he brings us into the room and Steve Sinclair basically goes, I want to sign the band. I want to send you to Chicago to record with Steve Albini.
Wow.
It's going to cost $30,000. This is 1997. I can get you 30, but the money's got to go to Steve, you know, and if you could, can we take this song? And I go, well, yeah, the label's ready to let the song go. Like the label's fine with it. Like, you know, he's like, okay, let's take this song. And we have other material because now we had songs that we had not written with Pete. Now we're writing with Pete. So maybe we take that song and maybe one other song from the EP and we're going to write 8 other songs. We had about 7 of them at the time, or 6. And I was like, this is it. This is it. This is the way it's going to happen. And Pete gets me on the side and goes, John, there's nobody on the radio with an album that costs $30,000. Steve Albini probably makes $150,000. This isn't real. And I go, well, he just said it. Why would he say it? Like he was like, John, there's no way we're getting on the radio. Because he was like, what do you guys want? And he was like, I think Trailer could be a big song on the radio. And we were like, yeah, we think so too. He goes, but it needs to be reproduced and remastered and redone. with a better producer. I was like, okay, fine. So now I got Pete in my ear, who was like, listen, I just sat in on record label contracts with Keith for like a year. Like, I'm telling you, there is no song on the radio that costs $30,000. And he's convincing me, even though my gut instinct is to take it and sign it, right? So this is going on for a little while. I'm about to get married. I'm on the verge of getting married. This is 1998. I'm getting married right after New Year's. And there's some division in the band about this. Because Steve was like, listen, take some time, think about it. It's a huge decision, and figure it out. So I call Steve up on a cell phone from my office. I'm working in Wall Street, and he's picking his kids up from like daycare. And he's like, yeah, I normally don't take these calls, but I saw it was you and stuff. And I go, Steve, there really isn't any records on the air, on the radio for 30 grand, is there? And he was like, you know what? You're right. I mean, that's probably true. I mean, there probably isn't. But there probably is some for like 50 or 60 grand. And he was like, I don't know if we can go that far, but I'm telling you, if you go and do this record with Steve, it will get on the radio. We'll get you on the radio, regardless of how much it costs. He goes, you're reading too much into how much it costs and not into what we could do. And it's like, shit. So time, and I couldn't remember the full details around it, but the other half of the band is really upset. The reason why half the band is upset is because the reason why they wanted Pete in the band was because they wanted to throw me out of the band and replace me with Pete.
Whoa.
So the original guitar player and the bass player.
I'm loving the layers of all these twists and turns. So just keep going.
So, but I don't know about any of this. So I'm about to get married. I'm like 28 years old. I'm about to get married, which I would do many times in life, but this is the first time I'm doing it. And I'm like, listen, we have like an offer to go with the guy who produced like In Utero on the table. Like we did it. This is it. The problem was the other guys in the band didn't think it was a real offer. Well, they were afraid to take the offer because they didn't want to take it with me, because they felt like I was controlling too much of the situation and I wasn't singing very well and I was just talking a lot of shit. Meanwhile, all of this is happening as a result of these decisions that I was making for them.
Wow.
Right. And my connections through my brothers, they didn't like it. And so about like 3 weeks before I told the guy I'm getting married. He goes, well, don't call me for like a month if you're getting married. I don't want you to, So we're in Ace London now. We switch over to Ace London because Pete is running Ace London, which is only open as a studio for Typo Negative. And all of their road cases are in there and their gear is in there. So if you see a Tonystark press picture, you see road cases for Typo Negative. That's because it was basically furniture and Typo Negative's road cases. So we're in there, and I'm like, listen, let's take this offer. Let's go to Chicago. Let's re-record Trailer. Let's get Trailer on the radio like we want to. And Rob goes, I'm quitting. And then Ray goes, I'm quitting too. And the drummer was still in, and Pete was still in. Now, I'm just like, this is like, we don't have to take the deal. If it means you're going to quit, we can do something else. And then they're yelling at me about taking singing lessons and like, oh, if you would have just took singing lessons, we would have probably not quit the band. And I'm just like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Did you feel like there was any truth to that?
I don't know. I mean, but they felt there was truth to it. So their thing was, I think so I didn't know this at the time, but there had been a real movement to get me thrown out, to get Pete in when they saw Pete could sing. But Pete was like, hey, I came here to play with John. Like, I would never do that. Like, you know what I mean? Which would turn around to bite me in the ass later on in life. But he was like, look, I just came from a situation with Keith. Like, trust me, if you think John is bad, you should see what's going on with Keith. Like, John's bad, but he's not bad like this. Like, Keith was like really bad. Like, you know what I mean? He was like, if you guys think dealing with, now mind you, half of that band, the drummer and the original guitar player, they never really did much else. Like, this was all they knew. So I get married, and they're at my wedding, and I'm trying to talk to them about this at my wedding, right? And I'm thinking, you know what? Let's just let the wedding go, and then I'll call them in a few weeks when I get back from Florida, and we'll get going. So I still think I have the offer from MIA. It's a long offer, and it's 30 grand. No signing. All the money is basically going to get the band some good equipment and going to Chicago for 2 weeks to put us up in Chicago. to record with Steve Albini. And that's the offer. And I want to take the offer. So I come back from my honeymoon. I can't get Ray on the phone. I can't get Rob on the phone. Pete and Wayne, the drummer and the guitarist, say, hey, let's meet for lunch somewhere in Brooklyn. Wayne comes all the way up from Westchester. And they sit and they proceed to tell me that Ray has been conspiring to get you out of the band going back to like when the band started. He never wanted to be in the band with you. He thought you were a terrible singer. He used to tell the sound men all the time to lower your vocals because how bad they were.
Wow.
And I'm like, I didn't know. And now I talked to this guy every day for like a year and a half. Like, you know, I didn't know any of this. Like, I thought he was one of my closest friends. Like, I was just like, you know, like, how is this possible?
How'd that make you feel, kind of? Because that would kind of ruin my
Terrible.
day. Yeah.
Terrible. I couldn't believe it. Now, I just got married. I have a great job. I bought a condo. Like, the band is successful. I feel like I'm, like, this is sinking me. Like, I couldn't believe it. And they were like, yeah, Ray hates you. Now Rob doesn't like you either because of Ray, but Rob used to like you. And I'm just like, this is terrible. Like, I can't believe this is happening. So I go to Pete and Wayne. I go, well, what do you guys want to do? And Wayne and Pete were like, well, why don't we take the stuff that we have and change the name and get other people? And I was like, yeah, we could do that, but can I try to salvage this MIA deal if I can? Which was a total embarrassment. He completely, like, once I told him the other guys quit the band, he was done. And that we were going to change the name. He had the interest was gone. I think he had signed Crisis and maybe Candiria or Indecision. Because he had said, these are the bands we're signing. Here's my wish list. And I was on that wish list. And he signed everybody but us. And I don't think they got $30,000 to go work with Steve Albini. So now I'm like, well, fuck, I gotta make some changes here. But here's the thing, the Tonystark EP, people like it, and trailer, and people want the band to play, and we're getting offers.
Is that song available anywhere? I'd like to hear it.
Oh yeah, just put, it's catchy. I mean, it's really the music that makes it so catchy, but people really like the harmony, vocal, and the hook.
I gotta listen to it.
So now my brother Mark is blowing up like a balloon, like just a balloon. He gets signed to, and he's giving my record. His band is wearing Tonystark t-shirts and giving out my record to everybody, and people like it. And I'm like, well, fuck, I got to change this name. Which I didn't really like the name anyway. So I got to go to the label and I got to make a whole change here. So I get the Lament bass player, Jeff Mackey, to do some stuff with us because we still had some offers to do some really good shows. And we do that with Pete as the only guitar player. But now we take some new material that Pete was working on with Absolute Bloom and the good stuff from Tonystark, but we're playing the shows as Tonystark. But now Pete is really into this band. Like, he wants to take over the band. He wants to rewrite everything. He wants to change the name. He's writing lyrics. He's writing melodies. And that was the advent of Synthetic 16. And we switch out bass players for a guy named Mike Trzynski, who I had known from Social Disorder, who was a Wall Street guy like myself, great bass player. And I was like, hey, you want to just do like a rock band? But the onus was always to get to what Tonystark was offered. Like, we wanted to get there. The label believed in the band. The label, maybe didn't believe in me, but they believed in the band because now the label felt like that was my fault. Resurrection was like, yeah, these guys quit because you're an asshole. The band, they were like, who leaves a band on the brink of getting signed to, because the singer's such an asshole, so now I got to kind of repair the relationships, but I'm very angry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, but like musically, like when Synthetic 16 kicks off, did you guys have like a direction in mind? Because like when I listen to it, it's very much of stuff that I would really listen to, especially back then. I would always say like the guitar work was very much like Catherine Wheel, and like those types of bands. I saw that you guys even did a cover of Mother Mary, which I was like, oh, that's super cool.
Yeah, far. Yeah,
so Water and Solutions, huge record.
Yeah.
So, like, what was like the kind of the game plan for this? Like, just to, because I don't know what
mainstream rock. Like,
okay,
it was, instead of doing post-hardcore, and I just called it that. And there was another name they were calling it. I didn't know what they were calling it. So we just decided to call it modern rock. We were like, okay, Pete was a good-looking guy. I was not a good-looking guy. But Pete was a good-looking guy who could sing and write harmonies and play guitar. and he looked like a rock star kind of guy. So I was like, maybe we can gear this band towards, because Tony Stark had like people that liked the band, but this is the advent of emo. Like emo was becoming a thing. Like this was going to be what people would call emo in a few years. And during one of these sort of excursions, I meet Jeff from Thursday because he's interning at Big Blue Meanie, like when we're recording the Tony Stark record, and he loves the band. And he asked us to go play his house. He was going to college, I think, at the time in Jersey. So he lived at a famous house where they had shows in Jersey, and the whole show was the movie life inside and Tony Stark.
Oh, cool.
And I remember going up to Jeff's room, and he had the Tony Stark poster on his wall. And he's like, "Hey, I'm in a band too." And I'm like, "Oh, that's nice." Like, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, good for you. What's the band called? "Oh, we're going to call the band Thursday." Oh, that's nice. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I was so dismissive, like, of this guy who was so nice to me and who I liked so much.
Good for you.
Which would also come back around again later on in life. So, so now we have this nucleus of the four guys. With the Tony Stark thing behind it, we're still playing some of the songs. Pete is pulling the band away from that because he's like, "Listen, I was in a band with Keith with all his bullshit. Now I'm with the Tony Stark bullshit. I just kind of want to write stuff with us. I want it to be stuff that I write with you." So now I have a songwriting partner, like a real partner that I sit and write songs with and melodies with and harmonize with and bounce ideas off of. And I related it to like when Morrissey met Johnny Marr. Like, you know what I mean? It was like,
I was thinking more Richie and John Bon Jovi, but I guess.
But that's what it was really kind of like. It was more like that because we were both two wops from New York, from the tri-state area. But like, I was like, yeah, this is going to be my thing. And I put all my chips on Pete because I said, man, this guy could have fucked me out of Tony Stark, which is weird because he didn't have the personality to front a band. He was very aloof. I don't know if it was drugs or he mental illness. I don't know. He was just not a good social person, but he could sing and he could play and he was a good player. So now we're writing the songs. We're playing shows as Tony Stark while we're writing these songs that we want to present to the label. We go back to Resurrection and go, look, here's some demoed songs. We want to make the band a mainstream rock band. And he hears, I think it was the song Blue, which was the only other song that ever really changed my life. But he was like, and I wrote that, like Pete didn't write any of that. I wrote the whole thing. I wrote the melody, I wrote everything. And I helped arrange the song with him. And we give him the song that was be called Your Water. And I think we give him another song. And he was like, okay, I'll put this in. Well, we got to do a full length album. I'm going to put this in a studio. Because in his mind, this was like an investment. He was basically saying, I'm going to try to get you to get a record out so you can get signed because you almost did that for me in the past. Because he would have made money on that MIA deal, right? So we have like the end of basically Tony Stark, which is not even like less than 2 years from when the band started, mind you. Like it wasn't even around for 2 years. But that last run, like before these guys quit, my brother Mark helps me get a booking agent through the label. This girl who had the booking agent at the time, who's booking all of what would become these enormous emo bands, like like a precursor to that, like becoming a big deal. I'm sort of seeing the writing on the wall. Like I'm seeing that there's some changes happening on some of these out of state shows we get to play, and which is crazy when I think about it now. Because the guys that quit, the band was actually doing really well. Like it wasn't like the band was doing great. I mean, this is like we had the booking agent who would go on to book bands like Coheed and Cambria and Elliott and Jimmy Eat World and Hot Water Music and Saves the Day. Like
So it felt like the beginning of something.
Yeah, like it was crazy. So like we had the record comes out and like Pete's going to join the band and this Keith thing falls through. But like my brothers are doing well. Like it didn't really negatively affect the band that way. Even the MIA deal, like this booking agent that we were with at the time, we turned at the time, like, and I kind of fucked that up too, but I'll talk about that. But well, I did. I fucked it up. So like when these guys quit, they quit a band that was doing well. Like it wasn't like they quit because the band was shitting the bed. They just hated me that much. Like they didn't want to be in it that badly. Like, you know what I mean? Like it was almost like the success of it fueled them wanting to leave, which is a big part of it too. I mean, I don't know. I mean, the band was going to become like a serious thing. It looked like we were getting Shutdown were getting us on some very good shows with them, which was cool, but like high profile shows, one-off shows. And then this booking agent was trying to get us on things she had worked out a deal with our record label. They bought her a brand new computer if she took the band on. And next thing I know, like we're playing with we're doing a tour with Ink and Dagger. We're opening for Saves the Day, which is really, really funny. Are you familiar? I guess you're familiar with Saves the Day, right?
Saves the Day, yeah, for sure. We had Chris on the other show.
Chris is the singer, right?
Yep.
Okay, so I'll tell you a funny story about Chris. So we played Brownies with them, and he was very young. His mother made him apologize for yelling at the sound man. That's how young Chris was.
Yeah,
at that show.
He was super. Yeah. I think he started at like 17 or 18 or something.
Yeah, he was a teenager. He was very short, and so we got to play with them. And she was trying to get us on a tour with Hot Water Music and Elliot. And this was like '97, 98, and I didn't even know who the fuck these bands were. There was some records like Era Type 11 and 6 Going on 7. That's kind of like where all of these things were happening, like Sweet Diesel, like. There was this sort of thing happening in New York, and then I would play shows like with Ink and Dagger, opening for them in like Scranton or like Albany or whatever, and we would do like one-offs at like colleges, and so there was something happening. Like there was like this shift that I could feel like there was like this. I think we just called it post-hardcore. We didn't know what else to call it, but then these guys quit, and now I got Pete in the band, and we're writing what would be the album Your Water. And we didn't even have a name for the band. And the whole running joke was when we turned the demo over to Resurrection, the guy AJ was like, "Oh, these sound like songs like 16-year-old girls would like. Like this is not like these are songs like little girls would like. So that's where the name kind of came from. It was Synthetic 16 was like synthetic plastic girls, like would just think all these songs are about them. Like, you know what I mean?
That's great.
So that's where the name came from. And a lot of people hated the name. And after coming from Tonystark, it was like, oh, like I got to give it a rest with these bad names. But, Pete had a lot of control. Like, and I took a step back and I was like, well, Pete's talented. I'll let Pete kind of drive the boat here a little bit, but I'll stay on top of like the bookings and stuff between my brothers and the booking agent that we had. And we were working with people, like we were playing constantly, like Continental Brownies.
How often were you playing? Like, I mean, because like back then, back then locally you could hit up so many places in New York and Brooklyn.
Yeah,
like, it was
Lemoore was still a show. It was the resurgence of Lemoore. We were playing literally every weekend. We were rehearsing two nights a week and playing every weekend, or at least one night if we had to play on the weekends. But now, like the dynamic is changing. We went out to do a show, I think in Meriden, Connecticut, as Tonystark, and even with the different lineup, and we were testing some of these Synthetic 16 songs, and they weren't really hitting with that kind of crowd. It was still like a post-hardcore kind of crowd. It wasn't really a good idea to put some of those songs out there. So I knew we were going to have to switch it up. We got to find something. We got to find a whole other way of doing business here. And we record with the 4 people. We start to lay down the recording. We're going to do a full-on 2-week recording at Big Blue Meanie, only in Jersey now, not go to Utica, which I was happy about. This was in Hoboken. And at the time, I think Shutdown weren't working on their record yet. They were about to, but another band was working there that we were friends with, and they were putting out, I think, the Rosenbergs. If you ever heard of the Rosenbergs?
No.
Some indie band. Then there was some other posty hardcore kind of band they were working with. But Roger Murray from AF was producing my brother Mark's record out of there. And I was doing shows with his side band with his wife at the time, a band called Lady Luck, which he played bass in. So we got to play a bunch of shows with them, and I got to sing on their record. And I also got to sing on the Shutdown record that was going to come up around this time. This is 99, 98, 99, going into 99. So we take on another guitarist because Pete is just writing 6 guitar parts for every song. And he gets his friend across the street, this guy, Adam, who had no real playing experience, but, was really good friends with Pete. And they both had dueling Les Pauls, very expensive Les Pauls. And I remember Resurrection gave us a signing bonus. And we took that money and we bought equipment with the money. They bought new Les Pauls. I bought a whole wireless mic setup. We bought a van. We bought the van from Shutdown.
Bonus sounds like...
Yeah, we got a signing bonus.
Look at you guys.
It wasn't it wasn't a signing. It was just basically Pete basically had convinced AJ that we were going to be Stone Temple Pilots. We're going to be a successful rock band. So we need new equipment because like Rob was playing with like an Epiphone, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
For most of that time, Wayne needed new drums. Like I wanted a wireless mic, so I could like do fun shit in the crowd or whatever. And Mike got like a P bass, so we got a gear and we laid down with the foundation what was going to be that album. And I can't even believe I have to say this again. So we're recording the record, and I guess it's 99 going into 2000. And something happened. I don't remember what it was, but Pete was like, listen, we have to tour off this record. Like, we have to get AJ to get us a tour. We have to try to find someone to get us a tour. We don't have the booking agent anymore. That fell through because I wrote her a letter complaining about how she handled the band, how the band wasn't important to her, and we bought her a brand new computer. And she called me up and said, I cried and I read this letter to my mother. That's how much this offended me. This girl went on to book like Jimmy Eat World. I mean, she's a huge person in the record business. So
wow. I'm realizing a theme here.
yeah, this is the theme. So now, mind you, prior to that, we had played this conference in I think it was called like the Scranton Music Conference or some shit. Like we played there was like music conferences going on. We got asked to play, and the label would pay for us to like go there and like do like showcase there or whatever. So AJ Falvo, to his credit, hasn't made a dime pumping money out, believing in like these songs. He's just believing. And I think the trail, like the song Trailer was like the catalyst for him. He was like, well, I know that they had that deal because I had to help them, release those songs. So I know they're legit, even though they're not like drawing tons of people or like, selling, tons of records. So, but the attention is so favorable to these guys, right? So, and a lot of it was just courtesy because of my brothers. So it was like, it didn't hurt that Shutdown guys were wearing Tonystark t-shirts on every tour. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it was kind of a cool thing. Like, oh, what band is that? Like, oh, that's Mark's Brothers band. It's a post-hardcore band. Like, you would like them. Check them out. They have a song on this comp or whatever. And I think Resurrection had signed E-Town Concrete around that time. And that was they were making money with E-Town. E-Town became a huge band. So they put out that big E-Town record. I don't know what the fuck it's called, but not my thing, but nice guys. I mean, we were on the label with them for a bit. And they were a super successful band. So, not my thing, but it doesn't really seem to matter. So now we're recording this record at Big Blue Meanie, and the guys are producing it. I could tell don't like the band. I could just sense they don't like the style.
Or
musically, personally, I think we're okay. Musically, the two engineers, and one of them had done some pretty big things in the music business, not liking the band. Like and then auto-tune was sort of a big thing. Like Pro Tools was how everyone was working back then. This is like the late 90s. And, they had this Neve console, for those of you that are familiar with console speak.
For sure.
Neve, they had like a $300,000 Neve console. That was Big Blue Meanie's claim to fame. It was like the last Neve console built, okay? This thing looked like it belonged on a space deck, like somewhere in like Battlestar Galactica. And I'm in this like shitty 4-piece rock band. Like, we don't really need this level of production. Like, we don't. We didn't have it for the EP, the EP was like a glorified 16-track. But now, like, these guys, Pro Tools, auto-tune, dissect everything, break down every lyric, every line, spend 12 hours on the vocals. And I could see they're frustrated because a lot of my stuff is very flat, or it was written in a way that they didn't like. They're trying to restructure the songs. Now, at the time, I didn't realize that if they restructure the songs, they could claim ownership of the song.
Yeah, for sure.
You see what I'm saying?
Production
so I didn't
credits.
realize this. Here we go. So I didn't realize this at the time. So we had a flat deal. I think the record cost like 30 grand or something like that. It was like 20 grand or 30 grand. It was expensive, but some of that was most of that was production. And the other part of it was the release money. So we had already worked with them when the Utica, with Tonystark, but that was an EP, and it was like, it was done over like 2 days. This was being done over a few weeks, and we were going over big time, and the guys were working really hard. So something happens, and they're unhappy with something I'm doing vocally. They change something around, and my drummer is really upset about this, like, because he just feels like I'm not doing a good job. And we're having like this meeting. It's like we just finished recording. Now we're going into finish the last song, whatever. And we get in this huge fight, and he's like screaming at me about how bad the vocals are. And,
Wow.
Jay had to spend 16 hours auto-tuning every one of your fucking shitty vocals. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about, dude? And then Pete was like, yeah, well, he did have to redo your vocals. And I'm just like, well, why do you know this and I don't know this? Like, well, because you're not here. And I'm like, because they were there, like they basically were there 24 hours a day. I was going to work and coming later, and like, I was doing the singer thing. Like I wasn't hanging out all day
Yeah,
in the
for sure.
mix.
Yeah, yeah.
I did a scratch and then I left. And then I was like, okay, call me in to do my vocals. This is normal behavior. But they were kind of offended by this. And Mike, at that point, the bass player, had kind of had enough. And unbeknownst to me, Pete gets this guy Adam in the band under the auspice of maybe we should throw John out and I could sing for the band now. This is now like a year later after, Tonystark wanted to do this. So they're going to throw me out like right before the record comes out of the band because they were unhappy with the way I was acting and my voice. And I'm just like, what a terrible, and I'm saying to myself, this is the worst business decision ever. You just made a whole record with me and you're not going to have me in the band. Like, what do you think this record's going to be? Not going to be worth anything. Like, I could take this record and go do something else.
Yeah.
And I think they didn't really think about that. And I remember I got out of that studio at like 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. I go back home to my ex-wife in my condo and I didn't know who to call. And I called Joe Affey at like 8 a.m. to try to tell him the story. And he's like, yo, it's 8 o'clock in the fucking morning on a Saturday. And he's hung up on me. And I'm like, am I thrown out of the band? I don't know. And I'm like, well, I don't want to get thrown out of the band. Because we got this record coming out. I just spent all this work on it. So somehow we resolved this. And then Mike goes, well, I'm just going to leave because Pete wants to tour. When he's not talking about throwing you out, he's talking about touring. And I'm not into doing either one of those things. But he was like, but if you're going to stay, you should probably, watch this guy or get rid of this guy. And I'm like, well, I just wrote this whole album with him. How can I get rid of him, right? Mike goes to quit and Mike is leaving. And I'm like, well, shit, like, I don't know what to do with Mike, but Mike says, I'll stick around and, until you get somebody else. Cause it wasn't like, he was like, we were going to put the record up. Mike was going to gradually leave the band. That's the way that worked out. Mike was going to gradually leave the band. So I was like, well, shit, maybe I can get Mike to stay if we get rid of Pete. Now, the record's going to come out like in a few months.
Yeah,
Like,
and the funny thing is like you guys are fighting, and me listening to the record like 20 years later, I'm thinking like this is a great record. Why I can't really comprehend why anyone would want to abandon ship after
but everything was riding on it though, Sam. It was like this, like AJ basically went into serious debt to get this record on the radio. He was like, I have to get this record on the radio. I have to get this record on the radio. So now we have Pete is pushing this song, Army Ants, and that I wrote half of it and he wrote the other half, but it had been in his wheelhouse for a long time. And he's like, this is the song that's going to get us on the radio. And I was like, all right, well, maybe. I mean, it's very catchy, but it's a very hard chorus to sell. Like it's, it's very wordy and, and I was like, it's not really that repetitious enough. Like, you know what I mean? But I get it. It's a popular song. So we got an opportunity to go to Arizona to do like a week in Arizona prior to go do the recording. And we had like demoed the songs. And while we're out there, I noticed Pete, his behavior is very strange because I had not spent this much time with him. I was going to spend literally like now a week with these guys straight in the West Coast.
The make or break.
Yeah, this was a friend of ours, we had a contact through Alice Cooper, through my drummer's dad, was very friendly. Like he played golf with Alice Cooper's best friend. So he's like, hey, can you help my friend's son's band? They're on a label. Can you get them some shows out here? And Alice Cooper's like, yeah, call this person. They'll take care of it. So we get to open for Modern English at this huge club in Phoenix.
Wow.
In 2000, in 99 rather. And right before we go to record. And then we get to play on Good Morning Phoenix, which is a Fox 10 morning show. And we have to do an interview at University of Arizona and 2 other shows, right? So just a lot of stuff to do in like a week, especially go to the West Coast. So I fly out with Mike. The band drives out with the gear because they want to drive. They want to road trip it, because they're into smoking cigarettes. Everybody's smoking cigarettes at this point. And, they were like, yeah, we're just going to buy a carton of cigarettes and get gas and just drive the gear down there in the van. So we're driving our van to Arizona to play shows with all of our gear. So I fly out with Mike And as soon as I get off the plane, I got to go do a show. Like literally, like no time. Like I wash my hands, I pee, and then I'm in the car getting driven by somebody's cousin with Mike to go play like in an hour. And the next day we got to be at Good Morning Arizona at 5 a.m.
Wow.
to load in, because you have to get everything sound checked before they go live at 6 a.m.
Oh.
And they'll only let you rehearse during commercials, which are 2 minutes, but they're going to only let you do 90 seconds because they can't have any of the sound to pick up. Now it's already like 100 degrees. It's the summertime in Arizona. And I'm like, holy shit. But this is what you train for. I mean, this is like what you,
yeah.
this is,
That's
what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
This is the life. Right. And I'll never forget, we're in Arizona and we do the morning show and we do Army Ants. And then I think we do a B-side, which I still don't know why the fuck we did this song. It was all Pete instead of Blue. And Army Ants is too long. It gets cut off. Like they go to commercial, like when we're writing the song. But I did the interview with the guy and all the other stuff. And they mentioned all the dates and this and that, blah, 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 blah. So we're in a Denny's. We play a show that night and the show's not good. Like it was bad. And I was like, fuck, the show's bad. So we're in a Denny's and it's just the band that we brought one person with us. And we're sitting there with my friends' cousins who live there. And these girls come over. It's like 11:30 at night. And they were like, did you play on TV today? And we're like, yeah. And she's like, hold on a minute. And then next thing you know, all these other girls come over. And they're all people who work there because they have it on in the Denny's. Like, I guess it's the big morning show there, the Fox morning show.
Yeah.
And she was like, I knew it was you. I knew it was you. And then I was like, oh my God. So they have like a vending machine with all stuffed animals in it. And they start giving us all these stuffed animals. And like they're hanging out with us at the giant table and we're taking pictures and nobody has a camera phone. Like, you know what I mean? Like cell phones aren't like for cameras at that point. And it's amazing. And we're signing autographs on Denny plates and people are coming over just because like they think we're famous. Like, hey, could you sign my my Denny thing? I'm like, yeah, we're passing it around. And,
was like the band collectively happy doing this?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Everybody was really happy doing it. But but it was weird because it was to me it was the highlight of the trip really. And we didn't get to the Modern English shows yet, which were awesome. But like to me, I was like, oh, this is what you do this for. This is what I wanted. And now here I am. Like I was in the hallway. I was going to get cigarettes from a vending machine. And I come back and there's all these people standing over the table. And now it's a college area, so there's a lot of young people going, who is that? Who is that? Who is that?
For sure.
And now we have some stuff in the van. So we're giving people some free like promos and we have posters and stuff like that. And we're just sitting in a Denny's signing shit for like an hour in Phoenix. Yeah. And I'm just like, yeah, this is. And so in my mind, I'm like, this is my life now. Like I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life.
Little did you know.
And not only that, now I'm giving myself a pass in my behavior because I knew I was going to do it. Like, I'm justifying how terrible a spouse I'm going to be, and how, my infidelity now is going to go to places unparalleled because some girls recognize me at a Denny's in Phoenix. You know what I mean? Like this is the highlight of my career.
Yeah.
And then of course we go to do the Fox. We do the Fox show, and then we do a radio interview. And we sing. Me and Pete we would sing harmonies on these things just to and they would go really well. And then like all these girls are like, wow, can we get on the guest list for the show with Modern English? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. And so we go to play with Modern English. And it's fine, it's great, but like they won't even like say hello, they won't talk to us. I'm like, oh, this kind of sucks. Like, you know what I mean? I was like,
weird, you know? Yeah.
It's weird. It's a weird vibe when the band doesn't want to talk to you. It's just like, and I went through that with bands before, and I definitely never felt good. Like, you know what I mean? And then the next day, the last show is opening for a Motley Crue cover band.
Nice.
At some metal bar, like a Castle Heights, where they actually have pyrotechnics in the fucking bar for the Motley Crue cover band, who I think are from Pittsburgh.
I mean,
and this is in Arizona,
especially, and at that point, like they were already over. Like,
but they only go up to the third album. Like they do like shout at the devil mostly, and they all look like Motley Crue, and they have the makeup on, and they have pyrotechnics.
Amazing.
And like I was fucking around with some chick out there for a little bit, and I got a tattoo out there, and I was just like, I'm in bad shape. Like I'm just drunk all the time, and I barely talk to my wife. And I was just like, I know this is the ending. Like that's ending. Like my personal life is going to blow up, but it's okay because I have this. Like, I'm self-sabotaging.
Yeah.
So all of that led up to going to record this record. And then we sort of, we kind of make peace. And then we start playing out for the record. We do the Castle Heights record release thing there. And this is, I guess, in 2000, in the beginning of 2000. And it's the reviews are not great. Like the reviews are semi-favorable. Like they're like, okay, you know what I mean? But the charting is strong. Like I remember about a month after the album came out, my mother-in-law died.
Wow.
And I had to go, she died of cancer, and I had to get my shit together and go spend a week in Pennsylvania with my in-laws and put everything on hold. So one of my brother-in-laws at the time was like, hey, you want to go to Villanova? We're just going to drive up there because I went to school there, and there's this amazing record store I think you'd really like. It's the coolest record store. And I was like, oh, I guess. We drive to this record store on campus of Villanova, which I'd never been to. And we go into this very cool record store. And as I go past their top 10 hot albums of the week, Your Water is the number 7 on their list.
That's great.
And I look at my brother-in-law and his wife, and I go, did you know this? And he goes, how the fuck would I know this? I don't even know what this is. He goes, wait, you don't know about this? And I go, I don't know about this at all. That was the power of charting. That was the power of McGaffey and charting and paying services to chart your records.
Yeah.
And then he goes to the girl behind the counter. He goes, this guy's the singer in the band, right? And she was like, oh, okay, whatever. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they go and they get all the copies.
You didn't drop an acapella for her?
No, I didn't. She probably was like, this piece of shit?
Yeah.
So like, like, look at this guy. He's like a fucking tubby bitch. So so she was like, hey, just sign. She goes, I think we got a poster somewhere in the back for this. So there was the Your Water poster with Misty Monday on it, of course.
Right.
And I'm signing those. Well, yeah, that was part of it too. I had met her boyfriend right before the album came out. He put out indie horror movies, her boyfriend at the time. And I said, hey, I'd love to get her to be on the cover for this album. And he was like, she probably won't do it, but I'll make her do it because I like you. And he was like, what do you say? Like $250 for me, $250 for her, and $250 for the photographer. And I was like, yeah, okay. I mean, I was like, that seems fair, but we're going to have to own the picture. And he goes, hey, you can own the picture, sure. And the label was like, yeah, it wasn't a terrible deal. It was like, but years later, she would act like she was pimped out for it. Like it was some big disservice to her, like she never got the money or something.
Oh, really?
And I was like, oh, absolutely, yeah. To people who would give it to her to sign, she wouldn't sign it. Like she refused to sign it for somebody in my office that saw her at like a porn convention.
Just maybe it's like,
she was like
the relationship with her. Maybe she wasn't with that guy.
It was more about the relationship with the guy. Yeah. But because I ran into Erin like years after that, and I was like, I'm kind of pissed at you. And she's like, you're pissed at me? I was like, yeah, like I heard you don't sign the record. She was like, that's bullshit. I totally sign it. And I go, I don't know. This guy didn't seem like he was lying.
Well, shout out to Spider Babe.
Yeah, to Erin Brown, aka Misty Monday.
That's right.
The Your Water Babe. So it's like things are happening. Like there's good things going on. Like there's all these really, really good things going on, and there's interest from major labels now, even though the record's not doing well. And I'm getting very bizarre phone calls through the record company. Somebody got in touch with Wayne through the Arizona shows from Warner Brothers, and then they got in touch with the label. And there was like real interesting parties interested in this band. Like now it's like, oh, this is coming back around again. And they wanted to hear more material. And we had tons of more material. But Mike was leaving. The bass player, Mike, was leaving. And I was like, well, that's going to be a fucking problem. You know what I mean? Because Mike was like, Mike had a good Wall Street job like me. He was an older guy. You're leaving me with like these crazy, the crazier dudes in the band. And that's when we kind of rearranged the band a little bit. And we get a guy named Eric Gutman, who would turn out to be an actor in Jersey Boys and go on to Broadway.
Nice.
And he ends up in the band for a while we restructure the band, try to change the band a little bit and change things up. And we're trying to write more radio-friendly type material. And we're playing locally all the time. Not really any tours going on at this point, but we're playing a lot. We're back to that swing of things. And now we have Eric in the band singing with Pete. And now we have this 3-part, Eric's playing bass, and we have this 3-part harmony going on. Good. Eric is like a fucking classically real Broadway trained singer. who had just moved here from the Midwest, and he grew up in LA, and he ends up in the band, and he thought he was going to play guitar, but we switched him over to bass, and now it's like we got strong. Like the band is going to be a strong live band. This is going into the mid to the end, right up into going into like when 9/11 happened, going into like 2000. And what was 9/11? Is it 2001, right?
2001.
2000. Yeah. 2001. It's terrible to say that. So like 2000, then we go into 2001, and now we play in this random show at Castle Heights, and Kevin puts us on with this band called 5 Cent Hero and another band called Red 12. I don't know these bands. I know idea about these bands, but they're really good. And 5 Cent Hero is like exceptionally good. And I make a point of meeting their manager, who's this guy Steve Barton, who becomes a very big guy in the horror world, who starts Dread Central and has a hand in a bunch of horror films. And it's like a well-known person in that area, in that horror world now. I think he had a hand in getting Terrifier released, by the way. His name is Uncle Creepy. Uncle Creepy. I don't know if you ever heard of him.
I know him because my friend Rob worked for Dread, and they put out Terrifier. Yep.
Yeah. So
we had Damien on the show, the director.
Okay. So I know. Steve introduces himself to me. Goes, hey, me and my friend manage 5 Cent Hero. Your band's awesome. I go, dude, your band's awesome. I go, I've been looking for a band like this like forever to like play around the city with. Like we should team up. We should do like a Wonder Twins team up, a Wonder Power Superpower team up here. And next thing you know, we're obsessed with each other. Like we're the three of us, the three bands, mostly us and 5 Cent Hero, we're never going to play without each other again. Like we've decided, like we're in love with each other. Like we're spending all of our time together. We're getting up on stage doing each other's songs. It's like this beautiful thing is happening. And I could see Kevin is looking at this like, Castle Heights is now like a rock club. Kevin always had the best intentions, but he was in love with his club. Like his club was his life. Like he wasn't interested in going past that. Yeah. He wanted that to be like his world, like I could conceivably at this point in time see him saving up money to buy the place. Like he was not looking to manage bands, or he was tour managing Shutdown, and he was, he's tour managing some other bands, Irate and Sworn Enemy. He was one of the first managers of Sworn Enemy, but like Castle Heights was Kevin's thing. So Kevin's like, this is the band that you need to hook up with. Like, you and these guys just need to play everywhere together. I'll help you if you need to get booked in other places. And this relationship with 5 Cent Hero was one of the best things that ever happened to me, because now we had another group of people and another fan base to play with. And it was incredible. And they got us, one of the best shows we've ever played was with them and Funkface and Danny Boy from House of Pain with Lords of Brooklyn, sold out CB show.
Nice.
And it was an amazing show. I mean, this was like, we had to go on early and whatever, but it was a great show. And they also got us to play the Meadowlands with them. And then we got back to play the Meadowlands by ourselves. Like, we got paid a lot of money by Clear Channel to play there. But we put a tour together with them to go to Michigan. Eric was from Michigan, and we were going to play a bunch of clubs through Michigan. And then 9/11 happened. And the co-manager of 5 Cent Hero died on 9/11 in the World Trade Center.
Fuck.
This guy, Dave. Yeah. Dave worked with Steve. They were managing bands together. Dave was a photocopy repair guy who was taking a call all the way up at the top of the World Trade Center. Man. And he dies.
Brutal.
And we have a show coming up with 5 Cent Hero, like in 2 weeks, essentially, from that time period. And I'm like, oh my God, like, is this even going to fly? And we do the show. It's like 3 weeks after 9/11. And it was just one of the most surreal experiences ever. And in a month, we're leaving to go do the tour. The tour's already booked to go to Michigan. Not even in a month. And Steve's like, yeah, we're still going to do the tour. We're still going to go forward. Like, and I just couldn't believe that these guys were going, like, the pain that they must have been in. And I never got to know Dave, really. I met him once, because Steve was like the guy I got to know, but they were partners. They were like, they were both booking this band and managing this band. And we go to Michigan for like a week with 5 Cent Hero, and we just have like the best time. I mean, we just have so much goddamn fun. I mean, it was just
shows were good.
The shows were fine. I mean, the shows weren't great, but they were fine.
Yeah.
We had a radio interview, I think, in Ann Arbor or something, and we got into a college fight. Like, they robbed this girl's sorority because she tried to get us beat up at a show. It was chaos. I mean, I was like, you know, we had these two girls we're talking to in the middle, just start peeing in the middle of the street. I was just like, it was just this utter chaos of the world. Like, it's just,
Sounds
it
like
was
fun,
so
man.
much fun.
Yeah,
It was fun, dude.
for sure.
But it wasn't like successful. Like, it wasn't like, it was great for us to be together.
Together,
But
you
then,
make
like,
the memories, you hang out.
yeah,
It's a
yeah, it was
story
fun.
that you
It was
tell.
like,
Yeah.
there was 13 of us all together in two giant cars and vans, just like, we had the CBs. We were like making fun of each other the whole time and writing songs, making fun of each other, and videotaping each other. We were like, it was just dude, it was so much fun. And then, like, we're not really progressing. Like, the band's not really progressing at this point. Like, it's just, we're sort of laying back and doing local things. The label interest drying up, like, and then decided to shake things up a little bit. Pete is just so out of control on these shows, and he never has any money, and he's always disappearing, and I don't know if he's got a drug problem or mental problem, but I was like, Pete's got to go. Like, he's bringing this whole thing down. Steve from Shutdown is coming to a lot of the shows because my brother had moved to Florida and Shutdown broke up. And Steve always liked Tonystark, and he was very supportive of the bands. So the other guys in the bands were like, do you think you can get Steve to replace Pete? And I was like, I don't know. I was like, I don't know if that's such a good idea, because I don't know if Steve's going to want to do that. He just spent all these years in a band with my brother. And I make the pitch to Steve, and I was like, listen, we're going to sack Pete. Do you want to take a spot? And he was like, yeah. Like, yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
And he was like, what do you think I've been hanging around for? Like he saw like that the band was a rock band that does well, that plays good things and has success, but doesn't he was exhausted. He had just toured the world with my brother. He'd been to Europe, he'd been to Japan and Americas and Victory Records and just a lot of drama. And he had enough. He was just tired. So I throw Pete out, and it was hard because I'd spent all this time with him, but it was time for Pete to go. Like, Pete needed to go. So I remember we get rid of Pete, and we have this big show coming up, and Steve's going to play, and it's in Jersey, I think, or something like that. And a couple of people just tap me on the shoulder and go, "Where's Pete?" And I was like, Pete's not playing tonight. And they're like, "Oh, is he not in the band?" I go, "No, I don't think Pete's going to be in the band anymore." And they were like, that's weird. And Pete also sang a lot, but I had Eric, so I wasn't really that worried about it.
Sure.
And this is really like the nucleus of the band. Like, at this point, it's Eric Gutman on bass, Steve from Shutdown on lead guitar, Adam on rhythm guitar, Wayne on drums, and myself. And now Steve is coming in like a bandit with material, like just a bandit of songs. And I'm like, wow, sounds like the Foo Fighters. Like Pete wanted the band to be Stone Temple Pilots. Steve wanted the band to be the Foo Fighters. And the Foo Fighters were huge at the time. This is like the early 2000s. And 2002, I was like, well, shit, we have all this new material with Steve. Like, I don't even want to play that much stuff off of the old album anymore. Let's just move forward. So we had like an album in between, and then we had an album with Steve. So I meet this band called Red Engine 9 that I met at a music conference. And this guy, Dominic, was really... And we just liked each other. Like, we liked each other's bands. We decided to exchange phone numbers and emails, and we start giving each other gigs. So he's on a label called Gig Records with a guy who used to work at TVT, this guy named Indian. And he goes, you know what? I think Indian would like your band. I don't think he would have liked that. The stuff you're doing now is more like guitar rock. Like, but, I don't want to give him the Your Water stuff. Do you have any of this new stuff? So in the interim of all this, Eric gets us a lot of looks because he's doing like off-Broadway shows at the time. There's this movie going to Sundance that needs some material that he met through a guy, and they came to one of our shows and they asked if they could use some of our songs in a finished film they're taking to Sundance, a movie called Pounds. And this is like 2003. And they want to use 2 songs in the movie. So I didn't get to see the usage of the songs, but I got to sign off on the ownership. The guy comes to my house. He's literally getting on the plane to go to Sundance, the star of the movie. And he's sitting in front, I'm living in Manhattan at the time, in Soho, and he's in front of my building, and I'm signing the contracts with him while he's trying to get to the airport. And he was like, I go, just so you know, this guy named Carmine, I go, I never saw the finished product. And he goes, wait, you never even saw the movie? I go, no, the other guys did. I didn't have a chance. I just, and he goes, oh man, I feel weird now. And I go, no, that's fine. I go do well. So they go and they do really well. And they think of the movie's but they're up against like Open Water and Napoleon Dynamite. Like this is a really good Sundance year.
Wow.
Yeah. So they sign 2003 into 2004.
Yep.
So they basically the movie gets bought by Showtime, and I guess Kirstie Alley had a show called Fat Actress at the time.
Yep.
And they wanted, this movie was about a guy who really loses like 150 pounds in the movie as part of the shtick of the movie. And they were great guys, awesome people. But we thought that was going to help us. Like we thought that was that'll help us. And that movie, I don't know how familiar you are with independent films, but they could not get released for a very long period of time. Like years it could take for one to get released.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, yeah. Especially
back then, absolutely, because they held out, and the movie never comes out. Like they do like little showcases here and there, and like we're in the movie, we have the closing credits, and like we have a big scene in the movie. But like everything else in my life, as soon as I go to sing, it gets cut off. Like it's like every time. So it's like Pounds is a thing, doesn't pan out. We end up not doing the shows with 5 Cent Hero anymore because there was some kind of beef over something that happened at the Meadowlands, which is still to this day on the stand. Eric is getting married now, and he's going to move to California, and he wants to quit the band. So I'm like, well, fuck, this is bad because Eric's the only other person who could sing. And like, we have all these harmonies and we're trying to get signed to this label. We go, before Eric gets married, I got divorced. I'm getting married to somebody else. I'm living in the city. And Gig Records, we go to meet Gig, and they're like, yeah, we'll go record. We'll put this out. And I was like, okay, can you put it out at this time frame? Because we got this movie coming out. We got this other stuff. I was like, yeah, that's no problem. It's no problem. So we go and record. I record right up until I get married. Like I'm literally like in the studio, and then I'm getting married like 3 days later. And my honeymoon is going to be this music conference that they put us on in Delaware. Like I got to go, like that's my honeymoon now. Like that's how committed I am to this happening. This is 2003, and I'm just like, okay, I'm going to record this album. We're going to go play this showcase, and then the album's going to come out in like 4 months. And we go to do this conference, and the guy comes to the house I rented, and I rented 2 houses. I rented one for me and my wife for a few days, and then the band came out and put their girlfriends and wives or whatever. And the label comes over, and he's like, yeah, I like the recordings. I think it's good, blah, 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 blah. So you guys are playing this club you're playing tomorrow night. It's in Dewey Beach, Delaware. And it's awesome. It's like 4 days of music conferences. And the show that we were on, we had played there the year before. We had an amazing slot, an amazing show, independent of any label or anything like that. Now we're going through the label, and the show is terrible. Like there's no one at the show. The label's not even there. So I'm a little annoyed with this guy. And I go to see him, and he's at some bigger show with this bigger band with other people. And I'm like, hey man, like that show sucked. Like what the fuck? And he was just like kind of blowing me off. And I could sense like he wasn't as really into it as maybe I thought. And then I go to the guy, Dominic, and I'm like, hey man, like I'm worried, like, is this record going to come out? Like, because like we have everything ready to go here, and the label doesn't seem that interested. He goes, no, he's going to put it out. Don't worry. Like he wouldn't have recorded it and paid for the recording and all that stuff. He wasn't going to put it out. So I don't know what the fuck happens. There's a guy working with him for Gig Records. And I think at the time they were putting out a remaster of Ned's Atomic Dustbin stuff, which was kind of a big reason why I wanted to be on the label. And it was 2003. And I get into some kind of argument with this guy. And I don't remember the crux of it, but the album was not going to come out now for an indefinite period of time. And I was like, well, fuck, we got this movie coming out, like on Showtime. Like the album was called Too Far Along. It was all new material, like 10 songs, 11 songs, whatever. And it's good. And it's really good. And I'm like really excited about it to come out. And I'm like, yeah, this is like a big deal for us. We're putting everything into this. And Wayne, the drummer, gets involved to try to figure out what's going on. And he gets the co-guy from the label on the phone. And the co-guy from the label is on the phone. Is like, yeah, Indian's never releasing this. He hates John. He doesn't like the way John talks to him. He wants to fight John. He wants to fight him. And I'm just like, and then Wayne was like, here we go again. Well, guess what? Like, you fucked this up. And I'm like, how did I fuck this up? And I go, because you told it had to come out by a certain period. I go, yeah, Wayne, that's because Pounds is coming out. Like, we need these things to happen simultaneously. Otherwise, we're not going to get the rub. You know what I mean? Like, there was a business reason
I might
for
have
that.
to enter the Curb Your Enthusiasm theme after that
Yeah.
last
Well,
line.
again, and like, I never heard or spoke to this guy ever again for the rest of my life. And the producer, the guy who recorded it in Queens, this poor bastard, he had the masters, and we asked him, how much did you get paid for this? Because I'm still waiting to get paid. And I'm like, oh my God, like, this isn't coming out. So Eric gets us on this thing where we're going to play like in on off Broadway for 2 weeks for this thing with this dance person. He's putting all this live music together, and it's basically like basically it's called Rock Stars, and it's like a dance company with live music. Like, it's a weird concept. That we start playing with them a lot. We don't end up doing a tour. Things are getting very dry. Like, it's just becoming like a very like bad period. Like you can sense like this is probably done, right? You know what I mean? But I really want to get this record out there. Like, so we kind of release it in a limited way independently, have a big party at Sine. So the band is limping into like nothingness. And then in 2005, just before I opened my store, my wife befriends somebody who would probably do one of the nicest favors for me in my life. My wife becomes very good friends with a woman who was married to one of the members of Erasure.
Okay.
Who was also in Depeche Mode and Yaz, Vince Clarke. So my wife runs a nonprofit, and this woman's volunteering there, and she says, "Oh, my husband, you may have heard of my husband. He was in Depeche Mode." And then my wife calls me up, and I like Erasure, and I love Yaz. I liked all that stuff growing up. So I was like, "Vince Clarke, I know who that is. That's unbelievable." She goes, "Yeah, that's her husband." I go, "Are you really? That's weird. That's so random." She's like, "Yeah, they want to hang out." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'll hang out with that dude. Absolutely."
For
So
sure.
we moved to Brooklyn, and now it turns out her and her sister they managed the Olsen twins. Like, they were like people in the music business. So I meet Vince, and Vince is like very dry guy, but he's intrigued by me. Like, he likes to make fun of the fact that I like Morrissey, and he likes me a lot. I could tell he likes me, and I like Vince. And now we start hanging out together a lot. So I bring him to Lucky 13, like, you know what I mean? Like, and the whole time I'm like, I'm not going to bring up my band stuff with this guy because I just like him so much and I have so much respect for him. So one night we're at like a bowling alley and we're smoking cigarettes outside, and Vince was like, "So tell me about your band." And I was like, Vince, I don't want to talk about the band. And he was like, "I don't know. Tracy tells me the band's pretty good, you know?" And I was like, and he goes, "Do you own all the songs?" And I go, "Yeah." And I don't, you know? So he goes, "Can you get me a catalog? If I give you somebody's information, can you send them the full catalog?" And I go, "Vince, you don't have to do that." He goes, "I can't ask you to do that." He goes, "Well, you didn't ask me. That's why I'm doing it." And I was like, "Yeah, I don't know, Vince." It's like right before like my 33rd birthday. And I get this person from, I guess it's from Sony. I get their personal email and I send it to them, and they send me a thing back and say, "Give me about 5 or 6 days. I'll call you up." So it's my birthday. It's my 33rd birthday. I'm working from home, and I get a phone call from Vince's publicist, his publishing company through Sony. And the guy was like, "Hey, I'm so-and-so. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the material you sent me." And I'm like, "Okay." He goes, "Well, first of all, I should preface, Vince just said such wonderful things about you as a person." And I go, "Yeah, I'm a little uncomfortable that he did this." And he goes, "Well, I certainly don't think you asked him to. I think he liked it enough." And Vince had just signed a deal with Nintendo for Move Out by Yaz, and he just got like a ton of money.
Jeez.
So video games were taking songs, like shipping off to Boston, I think was in one of that at the time.
Yeah.
So, but video games. So Vince basically Vince Clarke, out of a friendship to me, didn't give a shit about my band. Went and told his publishing company, "Can you get a look at this guy and let him listen to his material and see if he has anything to try to get him on a video game or something?"
So cool.
So the guy was like, "Listen, I listened to the whole catalog, and I couldn't really find anything specific to really zero in on. That's not to say that there's anything good or bad here. My goal here was to try to find you something, and I couldn't find it for you. Now, that doesn't mean I won't find it in the future. Do you have anything else?
because I definitely feel like there's like an arc here. And I was like, I don't think we do. I'm like, I think I sent him like 30 songs. So I sent him everything, and I ended up, copyrighting all this material and publishing it under my own publishing company. And he was like, well, I'll tell you what, if you get more stuff, feel free to send it to me. But just based on the stuff you send me right now, I can't really do anything for you. And I wanted to tell you that before I tell Vince. And I was like, you know what? I'm totally fine with that. That's fine.
Yeah, for sure.
And then I saw Vince, I guess, that weekend. And then Vince was like, so what did he say? What did he say? Because I didn't really talk to him. And I was like, no, he just said, send him stuff in the future. And he was like, he didn't find anything. And like, they were kind of annoyed, him and his wife. And I'm like, it's okay. Like, you don't have to find me a publishing deal.
Yeah.
Like, here's this British guy in like this huge band, like, and I've known him for like 4 months, and he's doing more nicer things for me than anybody that I've ever encountered. And I think because at that point, I realized that I knew how to manage my relationships a little better because they were all falling apart so badly that I was just like, here's somebody that I admire so much, that I respect, and he's my friend. And like, my wife's going on vacation with them. Like, I'm not fucking this relationship up by being a dick about a band. If it doesn't happen, at least let it be not because of me as a person. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Dark satellite.